Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and we have made it, everyone. Championship week, week 17. Let's go get that title. I've been watching Rocky workout montages all week, setting the mood right, getting hyped, because this is it. Everything we've worked for last 17 plus weeks, you know, it's a year-round business as well, comes down to this week. So let's figure out what the hell we're going to do to go get that championship gold. As always, I am joined by none other than PFF's own Dwain The Rock McFarland. Dwain, we made it, man. Week 17. How are you feeling?
Man, I feel good. Got championship games coming up. I was hoping to win even more money this year, Ian, but it's okay. It's still fantasy football, so I'm having a blast.
Amen to that. And with that, we'll get started. No Thursday Night Football this week. That's why we took our time a little bit more getting this episode out to you. And now you have extra days to just re-listen to it. I'm sure that's just a regular thing. But anyway, Dolphins at Titans kicking off the slate. Titans 3.5-point favorites. Game total is at 41. As we saw, Monday Night Football, there's really one person that matters in this Dolphins offense these days. And that is none other than Jalen Waddle. 8 full starts with Tua this year. He's peeled off PPR wide receiver 26, wide receiver 4, 16, 1 dub with 60, and most recently 11, 1, 15, and 8 finishes. So truly, we've seen him, all year kind of have enough volume to be this wide receiver 2 when Jacoby was under center, more of a wide receiver 3. But more and more, man, we're just seeing the absurd amount of volume going his way. He's making the most out of it, and we've been getting more and more wide receiver 1 finishes. You're firing him up, you're starting him, particularly in any format that's full PPR. But Dwain, I'm really excited about the upside for 2022. This was a great note from Kevin Cole, and something that you've brought up all year too, and we've looked at okay, how much is Waddle great, and how much is he the only option in an offense that wants to feed him high percentage low ADOT targets? So the question is does he have that explosive capability that, again, we've seen in Alabama. We know this dude can fly, just not necessarily have seen it a ton this year. And again, great stat from Kevin Cole, PFF's own projection maestro. This year, Jalen Waddle, 9.8 yards per reception, 5.5 air yards per reception. Rookie year, Tyreek Hill, 9.8 yards per reception, just 5.1 air yards per reception. Second year, Tyreek Hill, 15.7 yards per catch, 9.9 air yards per reception. No, that was not when Patrick Mahomes came in. That was still with Alex Smith both times. Just goes to show you that just because this is what Waddle is his year 1 doesn't mean he doesn't have a higher ceiling in the future. So maybe we get a little bit of that this week. He is, of course, facing the league's worst defense in terms of most explosive pass plays allowed to slot receivers. So Jalen Waddle, I think you'd be hard-pressed to name 15 or so wide receivers you want to start over him this week. And that is going to about do it. We got a 3-headed, committee from hell right now with Phillip Lindsay, Duke Johnson, and Myles Gaskin all getting involved. Devontae Parker, infamous goose egg, had 4 catches every single game this year until last week, wasn't even targeted. He did run 29 routes on 33 dropbacks. Waddle was at 32, so it's not like he got taken over on the depth chart or anything. Just realized, in this spot, Titans been much better against outside receivers in the slot. I think Parker is more of just a boom or bust wide receiver 4 at this point. And Mike Gesicki hasn't found the end zone or surpassed 60 yards since week 7. Not saying that can't change, but, he's just in that mix of borderline tight end ones that we would rather have a better option. Now, Dwain, I had one guy to talk about, Jalen Waddle. You have one guy to talk about, AJ freaking Brown. Wide receiver 1 season is back. Let's boogie.
Yeah, man, 53% of the targets last week. How about that? So out there for 86% of the routes, 80% of the air yards, 100% of the end zone targets, 69% of the third and fourth down targets. It was essentially every time Ryan Tannehill dropped back to pass, he was looking for one person only, and that was A.J. Brown. We've got a lot of different Titans that are going to be, we'll see what's going to happen with the new COVID protocols. Ian, for all I know, all these players will be back. The thing I'm worried about with this stuff is do we get Tyreek games, right? Where they're back, but they're obviously
it's happened several times too. Again, just because it's not hospitalizing the dude doesn't mean they're not going to be at less than 100%.
I know that's kind of concerning. So any guys that are borderline for me this week, startable, and if they've had COVID, and they're just now coming back, I'm bumping them down. Versus guys that haven't had COVID. So if you got a tier of 10 guys, 4 of them have had COVID, 6 of them haven't. The 4 that have had it, they're going to the bottom. Just because, and some of them will be fine. Some of them will be at 100%. But then there are others that we see come out at 50%. Amari Cooper couldn't even hardly play.
Madison's role was a little bit down. I know the game script was funky, but this has happened all over the place.
Yeah. So having said all that, with all the other things that are going on with, the Titans, as long as AJ Brown, can avoid all that, like he's in line to have another funnel day. I've got him inside my top 12. It's not the easiest matchup. The Dolphins have been a lot better, like over the last 6-7 weeks, really with their cornerbacks being healthy. They play a ton of man coverage, play the most man coverage in the league though. So anytime you get AJ Brown matched up and he's going to get these single man coverage looks, which he's really good at. He's good at beating press coverage. Really great off play action on the in breaking routes, especially whenever they don't, if they don't have kind of like that lurk underneath linebacker to immediately take it away, and they use a lot of play action to pull that defender down. There's going to be some good spots for AJ Brown to come through. Just realize it, he'll be in my top 12, but it's almost kind of a boom bust game just because of the defense that he's playing against. But wide receiver cornerback matchup overall, it still shows us that we still grade it out as a 90. I don't think we're really giving Miami yet credit for being full strength. Wide receiver strength of schedule, that was a 4.4 out of 10, so it's just below average. But again, AJ Brown, funnel situation, so he's a wide receiver 1 pretty much in every format this week. Ryan Tannehill, we talked about a little bit. I've got him at QB 18. I thought I might have him a little bit higher. It's just, it's a tough week whenever you've got, ahead of him, I've got Trey Lance, Taysom Hill, Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Tua. And then behind him, I've got Derek Carr and Mac Jones. So that's about the range, that I've got Ryan Tannehill in. And then as far as the running game goes, man, we thought we kind of had it solved. And Deonta Foreman had taken over 50% of the carries 2 out of 4 weeks. Well, now if you look at, or 2 out of 3 weeks, now if you look at it, 2 out of 3 weeks, he's only had 40%, so that's kind of how some of this utilization stuff goes. And why with some teams, I'm just less bold about putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is what it's going to be. And this has been one of those backfields. It's just been tough to get our arms around. And the bottom line is they want 3 players involved, which is not good. So for me, I do think Foreman is still the back is the most likely to score the most fantasy points. Doesn't mean that he's gonna. I think he's the one that's the most likely. But again, if you look at the snaps last weekend, 34%, 42%, 21% across Foreman, McNichols, and Hilliard. So McNichols is the passing down back. Foreman's the early down back. Hilliard is really spelling both of them occasionally, right? He seems to be the one that has the most juice as far as big plays. It's really Hilliard. But I don't think you really want to use any of these guys. I have Foreman this week at RB 34. And tight ends, everything else is a mess. There's nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, whenever you're starting running back, can't even get a snap rate, of half of the offensive snaps, probably a good idea to maybe, play the other guy if you have a close start-sit decision. Falcons at the Bills. Buffalo, 14.5-point home favorites. Game total 44.5. Did some hardcore weather research, typing in Buffalo weather on Google and seeing kind of what it looked like around kickoff. Could be some snow and wind in the forecast in this one. So if you're into player props, things like that, might be a good time to bet the under on those before everyone, starts to look on Sunday morning. It always cracks me up when, it becomes snow game week like Sunday morning because no one really gives a shit until then. So
until it gets there. Well, exactly. To be fair, it does change a lot.
Yeah, I know. I get it, but it's.
But I mean, the good thing is no wind. The winds are max 10 miles an hour northwest. So the worst part is when you see the 20 plus mile an hour winds. That's when I really get worried. Otherwise, I don't sweat it too much.
And it'll be 20 mile per hour winds with gusts up to 35. And you're like, good God, get me out of here. We're about to see Mike Vick Powerade commercial throwing balls out of the stadium.
I don't know that we'll ever see one top what we saw for Buffalo and New England a few weeks ago. The goalposts were about to blow over on that one.
The pregame videos were just absolutely absurd.
Oh yeah, everybody was freaking out. It was just storming Twitter. Yeah, it was
back
awesome.
To the topic at hand. Only a few fantasy viable guys in the Atlanta offense these days. And unfortunately, our king, Cordero Patterson, hasn't been treated like a king lately. Since he returned from injury in week 12, total offensive snaps, Patterson's at 156. Mike Davis is at 152. Yes, CPAT is still the undisputed early down back. 62 carries to Davis is 33. But damn it, people, Mike Davis has actually out-targeted Cordero Patterson since week 12, 16-15. So no, this usage doesn't make Mike Davis a fantasy relevant guy that we care about, but it does move Cordero Patterson far closer to that RB2 borderline over at the RB24 spot, as opposed to the top 12 back that we've been leaning on him as a lot of the year. And honestly, this matchup is just one that, again, if you have guys in these horrendous offenses, just try to avoid them if possible. This week, only 5 offenses are implied for 16 or fewer points. The Texans, the Panthers, the Giants, the Falcons at just 15. than the lowly Jaguars going into Foxborough. So if you have a start-sit decision involving a Falcon and it's close, pick the other guy. So Patterson, he's still been the RB11 in the stretch, and that includes some buys and stuff, but worst case, still an RB2 more weeks than not, really living on touchdowns though. So not saying it can't happen. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette, Damon Harris twice have had 100 plus yards in a score against this defense. I just really don't trust Matt Ryan and the Falcons to be doing this when last week we got 8 freaking touches for Patterson. So if it was an injury issue, like kind of we were thinking before, that'd be one thing. But like Dwayne, they put him back out there on kick returns last week and they still can't feature him more in the offense. So it's frustrating. And I'm not the only one that's frustrated, people. From Stephon Diggs today, who I think we would all agree is a pretty damn good football player, knows what he's talking about on the subject. He said that Cordero Patterson is the most talented player he has ever seen with the ball in his hands besides Adrian Peterson, quote unquote, generational talent. Not me. I did not say that. You guys know I'm a little biased. That's from Stephon Diggs.
I mean, you are a generational talent, but a different generational talent. It's not you.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification there, Dwayne. So CPAT, definitely more of a low-end RB2 this week. You know, I know we've probably been forcing him to lineups more weeks than not throughout the whole season, but don't be afraid to just go away from it because as manageable as teams have managed to run the ball against the Bills, like it's been good offenses, the Patriots, the Colts.
It'll still be hard to get away from Patterson though. Like you're going to struggle to get him outside your. I know you probably haven't done your ranks yet, but you're going to have to push really hard to get him outside your top 24.
I'm not saying RB3. I would never say RB3. That would be an insult.
I wanted to get that on the record for you that you weren't saying RB3.
Definitely not.
You might be saying borderline RB2. Wait, no, sorry. You're low end RB2. That's your go-to.
Right now, our PFF projections, again, Kevin Cole does a great job updating these throughout the week. They have CPAT as the RB17, somewhere between 17 to 23 sounds about right. Just realize not quite the same monster we were dealing with early in the year. In the passing game, I know Russell Gage hurt us last week, but people, he's still a top 14 wide receiver in 3 of the past 5 weeks. Now, this is the best defense in PPR points per game allowed to wide receivers. And yeah, I don't really trust his passing game. Kyle Pitts has this year 949 receiving yards and a touchdown. It's going to be like the worst 1,000-yard receiving year ever. I'm sure he's going to have a bright future. And you know what? He has actually had a much better recent past. Tight end 9, tight end 10, and tight end 4 finishes over the last 3 weeks. Again, keep an eye on the weather. And maybe you guys are like, Ian, of course I'm starting Kyle Pitts over these guys. So hopefully you do think I sound stupid, but just make sure, the Tyler Higbees, the Gerald Everett's, the Mike Gesicki's, the Hunter Henrys of the world, absolutely start Kyle Pitts over those guys. We can have conversations maybe about Dawson Knox, Dallas Goedert, kind of those, Dalton Schultz type guys. I still would probably lean Pitts over that group. But that's, I think, the more of the conversation, not the tight end one borderline, or maybe Pitts was at a certain point. So Gage and Pitts, because of the matchup, again, and keep an eye on that weather, see if the winds pick up. I'm not, firing them up as high as maybe we have in past weeks, but they are still volume hogs in an offense, and that's got to mean something. So Dwayne, real quick, where do you have Pitts? Because again, I think it's a pretty clear top
tight end 5.
Tight end 5. Okay, I was gonna say because the top 4 are clear. The top 4 are clear. I can see 5.
Yeah. He's in tier 2. So tier 2 has Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, Dalton Schultz, Dawson Knox.
Yeah.
I bumped Gesicki out of that tier. Pat Freiermuth is just below that tier. But you got Gronk, Kittle, Andrews, Kelsey above.
Okay. I like it. Well done, my friend. And you're right. I haven't done
I'm here for you,
yet.
Ian.
I'm going to get those.
You can just copy paste those over into your ranks.
Going to get those ranks done Thursday morning. And you can find them always at pff.com. And don't be afraid to use code ELITEUP for 50% off. And you can get my ranks, Dwayne's ranks, Nathan Yonke, the Real King's ranks, and the whole PFF crew. Locked article content and much more. What an organic freaking spin by your boy. Now, Dwayne, with the Bills, Josh Allen looking to repeat as the overall QB1, first guy to accomplish that, potentially since Dante Culpepper in 2003-2004. What are you making of this passing game now that, I don't want to say unfortunately, but now that we have the whole crew back together, Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis activated off the COVID list?
Yeah, I mean, it's a situation where being favored by 14.5, isn't always great for a passing game. But when you look at the Bills and the way they run their offense, they're really pass first no matter what the game script is. So it's going to be okay for Allen, and he's involved in the rushing game. So I've got him as QB3 on the week. Implied points of 29.5. Quarterback strength of schedule is 6.2 out of 10 against the Falcons. Offensive line pass blocking advantage is a 34, which is the second best on the slate. So you've got basically a top 10 QB SOS, you got a top 2 offensive line pass blocking advantage, and a quarterback with all of his weapons back, and an offense that throws all the time. So, what are you going to do? You're going to rank him in the top 3 no matter what. If you want to put him at 1, you can. You want to put him at 2, you can. You want to put him at 3, you can. I'm good with any one of those. He's in the top tier of quarterbacks this week. The guy that I'm really excited about, though, this week is Devin Singletary. So, and we've talked about him a couple times already, but snaps of 81%, 93%, and 68% over the last 3 games. Last week, we saw Zach Moss active, which was really kind of like for you and me, the last hurdle for Singletary is see what happens when Zach Moss is active. Moss only saw 33% of the snaps, 11% of the rushing attempts. He did handle some of the short down and distance, so 38% of that. And of course, Josh Allen's always a threat to handle some of that as well. But really, Josh Allen, man, he has not been handling all those carries down inside the 5 this year, like what we've seen in the past for him. He's only 23% of them, on the season. We saw last year, I think that number was closer to 45%, something like that. So they're letting these backs, run the ball when they're running. They like to throw a lot once they're inside the 5 and inside the 10-yard line. So with Singletary, now that it's funneled like that much, Ian, I feel good about him. I've got him as my running back 12 this week, which I don't think is crazy. The last 3 games, he's been 14, 7, and 10. So before people that are listening, grab the emergency brake and swerve across, highway lanes,
just to leave a bad review.
Yeah. Look, he's already been doing this. And so now that we've seen his utilization is going to hold, even when Zach Moss is back, I think you just got to kind of embrace it. Look, 14.5-point favorites. Yes, the Bills run more than they pass. They pass more than they run in all game scripts, but this is a huge favorite. And so there's going to be opportunity. Plus, if the weather turns into being a little bit of a factor, like what you were talking about, Ian, we could see a little bit more run for Singletary. But one of the more encouraging things is he's been involved, in the passing game. His targets are up to 9% now, but in the last 3 weeks, he's had a 13% and a 15% target share, 2 out of the 3 weeks. So I like what we're seeing from Devin Singletary in the top 12 this week. Running back strength of schedule is an 8.3 out of 10, which is going to be top 5 on the slate. 26.1 points allowed per game by Atlanta to opposing running backs. And Atlanta, like you said it, they suck. They trail all the time. It always cracks you up when I just say a team sucks. But it's just true. We're just talking the truth here. There's no hate. We love everyone here.
All truth.
Yeah, 27.2 rushing attempts allowed per game over the last 6 by Atlanta in non-overtime play, which is the 10th most in the league. Yes, there are some teams that are worse, but think it's 27 rushing attempts per game. And the reason why is because Atlanta trails all the damn time. So all those things working in favor for Devin Singletary. As far as the passing game goes, you guys know about Stephon Diggs. Nothing really to talk about there. He's going to be inside your top 10. The questions really come in. We did have Cole Beasley activated today. Gabriel Davis is coming back. And so now it's a matter of, okay, we don't know for sure what they're going to do. My guess, Ian, is that really Cole Beasley, we saw Emmanuel Sanders last week work outside. He played most of the routes. He is questionable for this week. I expect him to play, though. He battled through the knee injury last week. The thing is, if Beasley is battling a COVID situation, could that affect his game? He's not vaccinated. So, but there's enough of a question that we can't use Isaiah McKenzie. Cole Beasley needs to be out of the game before you can start Isaiah McKenzie. I've got a ton of questions around that. Beasley, I'll have towards probably I'm going to have him outside my top 36 because of the COVID stuff. But he'll be a wide receiver 4 is the way I'm looking at Cole Beasley. Gabriel Davis is really the same. I hate to say this, because I think Davis has done enough to earn the starting role. I think we all believe that. But it doesn't matter what we think. All that matters is what does the Bills coaching staff think. And my guess is that it's either going to be Emmanuel Sanders leading the way outside or a rotation between those two guys. Remember, Gabriel Davis, until Emmanuel Sanders got hurt, despite having, showing up in the box score a couple of times before he got his start because of touchdowns, he was really only out there in 10 personnel. And then he'd rotate in for about 10 to 15% of Emmanuel Sanders' work. So my guess is it's some sort of rotation between him and Sanders. Could it be Davis? on top of that rotation, like getting 70-80% of the routes? Certainly could. Like, the guy's talented enough. I just don't know. So I will have Gabriel Davis more around like wide receiver 50, 55, somewhere in there this weekend. He's in my tier 6. Tight ends, good matchup for Dawson Knox. It's an 8.7 out of 10 on the tight end strength of schedule, so that's going to be in the top 5. Tight end matchup is a 29. That's going to be in the top 6. So I do like Dawson Knox this week. I've got him inside my top 10. He's in the tier 2. You've got Atlanta giving up 12.1 points to opposing tight ends this season.
Yeah, man, the whole Cole Beasley thing, like, I understand if people aren't the biggest fan of the guy. Him and McKenzie have been on this team for 3 years. I don't think 60 minutes of a very good McKenzie game is going to completely flip the depth chart. And Cole Beasley is one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. Like, you can, again, feel free to hate the guy. That's just what's going on. And, you know, I think people just kind of let their personal feelings on this sometimes just end up infiltrating their fantasy opinions. So,
and I get it. Look, everybody's entitled to that. Like, that's why getting to have your own opinion like about this stuff is one of the most fun things about fantasy.
Sure.
Like, it's just hard for us to get behind because, like, you know, we're staring at the numbers and the data and like trying to weigh probabilities all day long. And so, like, once you look at it through that view, I just think it's tough. Look, to your point, like, to take all of this, you know, time we've had and to think, oh wow, this one game catapults Isaiah McKenzie into this big role. It's just not happening.
And look, if we had a full list of like, hey, here's all the NFL players that are vaccinated, here's the ones that are not, that'd be great. Of course, we would try to use that into our analysis. We don't. And that's why, you know, we talked about this in August, Dwayne, when people were fading Kirk Cousins for like not being vaccinated, and Dalvin Cook was out there in the same freaking not vaccinated protocols, and nobody ever said a word about it because one guy was more outspoken about it than the other. So when we don't have all the information on this, be awfully careful, you know, weighing it so much more for some guys versus others.
Very good point.
Jaguars at the Patriots, New England 15.5 point favorites.
You got the Jaguars
at 42. I got some horrendous teams coming up on this one. I'm the only one that gets to complain about this today. This one will be quick. Hey, Dwayne, here's a list of quarterbacks with one passing touchdown, exactly one since week 9. Trevor Lawrence, Mason Rudolph, Mike White, Jordan Love, Drew Lock, Tim Boyle, Cooper Rush, Nick Mullins, PJ Walker, Jacoby Brissett, Nick Foles, and Brian Hoyer. I was very disappointed that there weren't any like running backs or wide receivers that have also matched Lawrence's passing output. But man, dude, look at those names. Out of any of those quarterbacks, would anyone like put their neck out on a limb or their reputation and be like, no, this guy's going to be great once their situation gets better? Because that's kind of what we're having to look at with Lawrence. So, this is not a dynasty podcast. I'll just keep it sweet with, no, of course you're not touching anyone from this offense if you can at all help it. Because during that span, here's our ceiling. Marvin Jones had a wide receiver 21 finish last week, and Laquan Treadwell was a wide receiver 22 in week 15. If everything goes right, maybe one of these wide receivers, who the hell knows which one, gets you a low end or wide receiver 2 performance. Miss me with that. Honestly, I would say that if LaVisca stays out, Tavon Austin probably has the best chance of the group because he's probably the best bet to see a few carries in the absence of James Robinson. So we talked about the Dari Ogunbowale situation versus Raquel Armstead at length in our waiver wire pod. Spoiler, don't sign Dari over guys like Boston Scott and Darrell Williams. Seriously, please freaking don't. He's not going to be anything more than an RB3 if Raquel Armstead is out of the picture, which I don't think he is. I think there's a chance that Armstead takes over the backfield. So we don't know, but we do know this Jaguars offense, again, 13.25 implied points. That's one of the lowest totals I have seen the entire season. Going into New England, if you do not have a single Jaguars player on your roster, you should consider yourself lucky. Now, Dwayne, what's going on with these running backs? Because that's going to be the big difference maker. So when you kind of break this down, make sure with Harris and Ramondre Stevenson, if he returns from the COVID list, we keep in mind, what the ceiling can be if one of these guys is out. Because we know that Brandon Bolden can get that pass down work. But if there was ever going to be a game where we don't have to worry about a negative game script, sure seems like this one.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at week 7, Damian Harris minus Ramondre Stevenson, number 3 finish overall. Week 10, Ramondre Stevenson, number 2 finish overall with Damian Harris out. Last week, Damian Harris running back 4 with Ramondre Stevenson out. So you see what the magic, what the equation is here. If you get one of them out, like it's go time. right? So, I mean, we did see...
We had the one dud against the Colts.
The 53.
People.
It does happen, and that was Stevenson at a 53 in week 15 when we had Harris out. But otherwise, dude, you throw that out. Like, if we get this thing down to 1, you're playing it. Right now, Stevenson is still on the COVID-19 list. My guess is he will come off of it, given I think everyone's coming off the COVID-19 list.
With these new rules,
honestly, again, like kind of back to that, like I don't know what to think about these rules. In one way, it's kind of nice, you can get players back, but we really don't know how healthy they are. People are just pulling them off. So we'll have to wait and see. You have to let it play out for a week. Unfortunately, it's your championship week. So let's just hope that if you have Damian Harris, that Ramondre Stevenson is out, because otherwise I've got them both in tier 4. I think, it's a great matchup. You're favored by 15.5 points, implied points of 28.5, running back strength of schedule, 9.2 out of 10. That is the fourth best on the slate. Run blocking advantage of 86 is in the top 3 on the slate. And that's elite. Those are all elite. Those are all elite marks across the board. 15.5 point spread, 28.5 implied points, 9.2 running back strength of schedule, 86 offensive line run blocking advantage. So, like, if we had Stevenson out, you would have to rank Damian Harris inside your top 10. Like, that's how good it is. So he'll move up the board. Right now, I've got him at 24. I mean, just because if we look at the games where you've had Harris and Stevenson available, like, it just turns really into the Tennessee kind of backfield. You got Brandon Bolden handling all the passing downs. He's the Jeremy McNichols guy. You got Damian Harris is really your Deonta Foreman. And then you got Ramondre Stevenson coming in as Dontrell Hilliard, filling in, and kind of spelling both guys a little bit, but mostly Harris. And so they just all cancel each other out. So I have Stevenson at 30, assuming that he's going to play this week. So he's a guy that you can put in as a flex option, and he could come through because the matchup is nice. Like, we could see the Patriots run the ball 45 times this weekend. Like, we could see them run the ball a ton. Like, they could run 70 plays and 45 of them be rushing attempts, given who they're playing with the Jaguars. So you do get the matchup boost this week with both of those guys. So I think they're usable. As far as the receivers go, Jacoby Myers, I've got at wide receiver 40. Like, the matchup, and look, it's the Jaguars. All the matchups look good everywhere. But the game script's not going to be really great. So I've got Jacoby outside the top 36. When I get Jacoby into a matchup where we know that the Pats could be forced into passing, those are the weeks where he kind of breaks into the RB3 territory. That's not this week. Could he come through on efficiency? Could he catch 2 or 3 touchdowns? It's Jacoby Myers, people. He's not going to catch 2 or 3 touchdowns. Just making sure everybody's paying attention. Kendrick Bourne, just not on the field enough. He's just dependent on a big play. So that's really it. And then Hunter Henry, everybody got excited about Hunter Henry the week before, Ian, whenever we posted, a top 3 tight end
2 touchdown Colts game, yeah.
Yeah, big game. And then last week, came back and really gave a big dud. The matchup is fine, but again, I just don't see the Patriots being forced to use these passing options. So when you've got a run-heavy attack, you've got a rookie quarterback. Let's face it, Bill's still trying to protect Mac Jones as much as we may all like him and as much as people are going nuts over, Mac Jones. I mean, if you look at it, for example, last week, they trailed by 4 or more points on 86% of the plays, and they only dropped back to pass 62% of the time. You're like, 62% of the time, that's a lot. Remember, these are dropbacks, not pass attempts. They can lead to sacks, scrambles. 62% is not a high number when you're trailing 86% of the game. A normal number in that situation is like 75%. So it's well below the league average across the board in most game script situations. They want to run the ball. That is the Patriots' identity, and that's really where you should focus your fantasy assets this weekend if you're using any Patriots.
Yeah, Mac Jones has been the best rookie quarterback, but the bar has been so low that I think we've kind of maybe hyped him up a little bit too much. As we always talk about in here, I don't think any stat totally encapsulates a player. That's why we like to use multiple stats. And I went ahead and took the ranks from all the rookie quarterbacks in PFF passing grade, yards per attempt, adjusted completion rate, and QB rating. For those that don't know, adjusted completion rate includes throwaways, drops. It just helps give you a more pure measure of completion rate. And with all those in mind, 48 qualified quarterbacks, Mac Jones comes out as 21st. So yeah, that's better than Trey Lance at 28, Davis Mills at 31st, Justin Fields 36, Trevor Lawrence at 40th, and Zach Wilson at 42nd. But I think the big moral of the story is this class of rookie quarterbacks really hasn't done too much so far. So let's make sure that we keep expectations in check for their teammates. Raiders at the Colts. Indy 6.5-point favorites. Game total 44.5. Oh boy, the Raiders. Dwayne, look at me. They have scored more than 17 points once since losing Henry Ruggs. That's been the state of this offense. It's so annoying too, man, because like I'll do these quarterback charts, big time throw rate versus turnover worthy play rate. I was looking at the most accurate passers, even like based on average target depth, and I see, oh, there's Joe Burrow. Like that's the guy I was trying to show is like still really accurate while throwing the ball down the field. And there's also Derek Carr next to him, and I have to repeatedly explain that, like, yes, Derek Carr was a legit top 10 quarterback in the first 7-8 weeks of the year. We just have not seen that guy really in months. So without Bryan Edwards last week on the COVID list, okay, great. Now they had to feature Deshaun Jackson, right? Nope, they did not. Things called Tyron Johnson and Dylan Stoner got reps instead. Apologies to Tyron Johnson. I'm well aware he was on the Chargers last year, but you guys get the point. To see D-Jax have just a 52% snap rate in a week without Bryan Edwards, it's just painful to see. And, any hopes of him eventually emerging as a true boomer bust option is not going to cut it. Hunter Renfrow, 58% snaps. Zay Jones, 75%. So, the Renfrow wide receiver 1 era, I think has maybe passed us by here a little bit. Wide receiver 58 and wide receiver 29 over the past 2 weeks. So I think, I'm not saying that we need to completely forget about him as a fantasy asset, but it's also a situation where I think that if you don't have him in your top 24, I'm not going to freaking shoot you over it. So passing game,
you had to get dark.
I know. We made it a good 20-25 minutes before bringing a gun into the conversation. And, also not helping this passing game, as Dwayne just wrote out on our handy dandy show sheet here, Darren Waller on the COVID list. Dwayne, we were talking before the show. If we had heard any news about Waller, there it is. He's out. Probably. Who knows if he's even healthy enough to play without it. I can't imagine that they're going to rush him back at this point. So Foster Moreau, he let everyone down 2 straight weeks after Waller got out, but he has turned in 2 top 10 finishes over the past 2 weeks. Not saying he's a top 10 tight end. This is a matchup where even if the Colts tight end defense isn't the best in the world, I still think that, again, Raiders offense, 1 game over 17 points in about 2 months of action. I don't want anything to do with them if I can help it, but I do think Foster Moreau is still a solid top 12, top 14 option at the position. And finally, really the only guy in this offense that you should be starting and feeling even somewhat good about is Josh Jacobs. Might not be pretty, but guess what? Style points don't matter in fantasy. He's been an RB2 or better in all but 1 game since the Raiders Week 8 bye. If you just look at our raw PFF projections for total touches, he is one of only 12 running backs expecting to see at least 18 touches this week. So yeah, Colts top 6 defense against the run. But Dwayne, this is where it goes over to you. If Carson Wentz is out of the picture, which we'll see, Frank Reich's already said if he's able to clear the COVID protocol, he'll be starting there. If it ends up being Sam Ehlinger under center, man, I know Jonathan Taylor's a god. I know Raiders got some linebackers out, but there is a chance the Raiders get to play with some positive game scripts. So whenever we have a running back like Jacobs, any running back that can see 20 touches in pretty much any game script, you're going to have a hard time getting them out of, your top 12 to 15 running backs. So maybe you're incredibly blessed. I hope you are. And if it is between 2 top 15 running backs, take the one that's not in the Raiders offense, but just realize Jacobs is getting a true RB1 level workload. So Dwayne, overall thoughts on if we can trust anyone in this Colts offense other than Jonathan Taylor with a limited Carson Wentz or, God forbid, Sam Ehlinger under center?
No, I think we can keep this one short and sweet. Taylor's still going to be my number 1 overall back. The positives are you got Quentin Nelson coming back. He was activated today from the reserve COVID list. Some of the other offensive linemen look like they'll be back. So we should be in better shape as far as the offensive line goes. And it was impressive that Taylor was able to put up 100 yards last week, right? I know he didn't come through with the score, even in a situation where most of the offensive line was missing for the Colts. So here's the positive. The positive is Carson Wentz hasn't had to throw very much, over the last however many weeks. Let me just pull it up real quick. So I think they're going to be able to protect Ehlinger, but I think it will be a situation, and not that teams aren't already doing this, but where the Raiders will be able to sell out everything, Ian, to stop the run. But listen to some of these drop back rates over the last several weeks for Carson Wentz. Week 11, they dropped back to pass 35% of the plays, ran the ball on 65%. Week 12, when they fell behind, they actually did pass the ball 74%, but you get to week 13, drop back to pass 35%, ran the ball 65%. These numbers are absurd. Like, these are old school Ravens, old school Seattle Seahawks when Pete Carroll first got there. Some years that we've seen with the 49ers when they were ground and pound with Colin Kaepernick. Like, I'll tell you, here's the best way to think about it. These are very rare numbers to see when you don't also have a running quarterback. To see this with just mainly a running back and a quarterback that doesn't run is pretty insane. And then in week 15, they dropped back to pass 27% of the plays. They ran the ball 73% of the time. Last week, they ran the ball 46% of the time. So it's not like they've really been throwing the ball anyway. They've basically said, all right, let's see if you guys can stop us. And if you can't, well, guess what? We're just going to keep running it. So I think that will be the recipe for the Colts. Then it'll be a matter of the Raiders having to stop it early in the game. And if they can't, then they're just going to get, it eventually just like hemorrhages and turns into this really bad thing at the end of the game where Jonathan Taylor is just running wild. So Jonathan Taylor can run wild from the first play of the game, but you folks get my point. So Jonathan Taylor, it's not enough with Wentz being out for me to downgrade him any at all, really, because I think it's more about Taylor and the offensive line. It's one of the rare offenses in the NFL where I think it's more about that than it actually is, the quarterback. And not to say Wentz is bad. They just haven't had to have him do much, Ian. Like, they just, haven't needed to. So that's going to be their hope, is that they don't need to have Sam Ehlinger do much if Wentz can't play. There's still a chance that Wentz could be activated on Sunday morning and make this contest and actually be able to be under center. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, what I will say, you can't touch Michael Pittman Jr., in my opinion, this week. I'll make sure he's outside my top 36. Especially if Ellinger's playing. Like, it's already been a mess. Like, he is the main target there, but when you run the ball as much as those numbers I just gave you, but basically, it's a game script situation. Like, you need the Colts to fall behind for Pittman to give you a shot. Mo Alley-Cox could be the lead tight end this weekend with the Jack Doyle injury, but again, you just heard those numbers. I don't think the Colts are going to pass as little as possible. So even with Doyle out, I don't see right now. I've got Mo Alley-Cox at 19 in my ranks, and again, I haven't tightened these all the way down, but I don't see him climbing up past maybe 16.
Okay, let's say like Vince McMahon buys the NFL and he decides to 15 minutes before the game, he's like, all right, I'm going to let a random fan play quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts today. You're not going to have Wentz, you're not going to have Ehlinger. You can use Wildcat, but you're not going to have your usual quarterbacks. Would you rank Jonathan Taylor outside the top 12? If we just had no quarterback.
I think that scenario would be a tad different, just because, but it would be tough. Like, because I think you would all out.
That's what I'm saying. It would be tough.
It would be rough. It would be tough. That's what's funny. You're right. But it would be an all out. I would rank him outside then, just because it would be all out run blitz every play. Ehlinger, at least we know can throw a forward pass. Like, he can throw the ball down the field. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Oh my God. I want that scenario to happen one day. Maybe I'll get it going on Madden just to see what's what. Buccaneers at the Jets.
Let's get ready to rumble at the middle of the field and with a lotto system, and everybody's going, God, not me. But you can't come in the stadium unless you sign the waiver that you're going to have to play quarterback if your name is drawn.
That'd be a nightmare, actually. I thought it'd be fun for a second, but now that we're talking through it, I don't know. All right, Buccaneers at the Jets. Tampa Bay, 13-point favorites. Game total of 43.5. It's just wild to me. Tom Brady, we know he's still incredible, but number one in passing yards, number one in passing touchdowns, number one in PFF passing grade on the year. I know Aaron Rodgers right now is the odds-on favorite for MVP, but I think if Brady can end this year hot, I don't think the mainstream media are the biggest fans of Aaron Rodgers this year. I would not be shocked if TB12 goes ahead and scoots up that award. I know that he would break his own record for the oldest winner. I think there's a lot of storylines going in that direction. So if
Rodgers just announced today that he's still not against retiring this offseason. So we'll have to wait and see. Here we go. He's already starting it.
Here comes another freaking offseason of this mess. So I don't know, man. If you're a gambling man or woman out there, you like those MVP odds, I think these are the best ones you're going to see for Brady, because in this matchup, man, I don't know how they aren't going to go nuclear when you got someone like Antonio Brown playing as well as he is. I mean, on the year, wide receiver 5 in PPR points per game, and this is a bottom 10 defense in yards per attempt, explosive pass play rate, and QB rating allowed to wide receivers. Like, he just really took Stephon Gilmore to school, like, all game last week. I know he got a groin injury towards the end, but the comeback off the knee injury, off the suspension, all the BS, 15 targets and then catch 10 of them for over 100 yards. I mean, it just goes to show you that AB, he looks like he did pre-2019, man. So similar to some of these other guys we talked about, I'm not saying you guys need to be the biggest fan of AB the person, but the football player looks as good as freaking ever, and Brady is being sure to feed him all that he can handle. Nobody has been targeted on a higher percentage of their routes than Antonio Brown this season at 32%. He's a top 5 wide receiver, Dwayne. If I get a single start-sit question with Antonio Brown in it, I'm probably going to say some spiteful shit back to you. So just be ready for that and start Antonio Brown. And also start Ronald freaking Jones. Dwayne, I think you called it out Sunday night. Rojo back in the top 6. Why the hell not? League worst defense in PPR points per game allowed to the position. Right now, PFF only projecting 5 running backs for at least 20 touches. Najee Harris, Sony Michel, Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson, and Ronald Jones. We have 20 touches. Again, we talked about Jonathan Taylor with 20 touches from a fan and how he'd probably still be, at least a top 20 or so guy. We have Ronald Jones with 20 plus touches from Tom freaking Brady in the league's second best scoring offense. Get him into all of those fantasy lineups. And the same thing goes for Sony Michel, who's on that list as well. Final note, because we can't trust these other receivers at the moment. Tyler Johnson was the starting slot, but he was still under 60% snaps, wasn't even targeted last week. And, as our coworker Sam Monson has brought up, a lot of times, man, this weird shit kind of happens in this offense, and it does seem to be Tyler Johnson's fault a lot. He motioned at the wrong time last week, and Brady had to stop him. AB got blown up on the screen.
Weird. He just held him. He just literally put his hand out. And Tyler Johnson's like, what? And he's just like, basically, just don't move. Hang on, wait for it. Okay, go. He snaps the ball.
Sam was explaining this to me on the PFF show that morning, and then he just sends me a video of that play after it happened. And I was like, yes, I now know exactly what you're talking about.
Hey, real quick on the Bucs too, just with having Mike Evans out, having Chris Godwin out, last week was really the first game, Ian, where we've seen them just, decide they're going to run the ball. Earlier in the season, so last week they didn't trail by 4 or more points ever in the game. They led by 4 or more on 84% of the plays. So if you look at the games earlier this season where they led by 4 or more, at least 70%, here's the pass rates: 67%, 67%, 56%, 57, 68, 67. So pretty much it's high 60s, high 50s. Last week, same scenario, they only threw the ball. They only dropped back to pass 52% of the time. So they did actually decide that they wanted to run the ball. And we saw a lot more 13 personnel, the most of the season, 12 personnel. They ran 12 personnel 57% of the snaps last week. The previous high on the year had been 29%, which was week 1. But the previous weeks, you had seen 20%, 19%, 6%, 15%. So the 12 personnel using the 2 tight ends and then running the ball more could be part of the equation for the next couple of weeks for the Bucs as they get healthy.
And it's good that they run the ball more, because I don't know what to make of these wide receivers behind Antonio Brown. You said it, Godwin, Evans out of the picture. So last week, just talked about Tyler Johnson. So the actual number 2 out wide was Cyril Grayson. But we got to remember, this was with Scotty Miller only playing 3 total snaps for whatever reason. That could feasibly increase. And Brashad Perryman, as well as Jalen Darden, were on the COVID list. Perryman has already been activated. So, Girl Scout shows up at our door and says, which freaking Tampa Bay wide receiver other than AB are you putting your trust in? Otherwise, you guys know. I would go with Brashad Perryman in that scenario. I would much rather not be in that scenario, though. And just focus on AB, Rojo, and Rob Gronkowski, who is my tight end 3 on the week behind only Kelsey and Andrews. If we end up seeing Jimmy G play, I'll probably bump Kittle ahead of Gronk again. But right now, he's Tom Brady's number 2 receiver. I just think that's too valuable of a role to be fading in Fantasyland. So, Dwayne, I had a couple bad teams. Now you got the Jets, man. So we can talk some Michael Carter goodness. And other than that, do your thing.
Yeah, so just with the Jets, there's really only 2 players, to cover. Carter being one of them. He's really back to that utilization, kind of marker of where he was in week 7 and 8, whenever he had finishes of 7 and 1, and week 5 he was the running back 24. Week 10 running back 13. So I think the upside. He was running back 17 last week, right? So I think he's in that mid RB2 normally. It's not a great matchup though this week. You get the Bucs, the 4.8 running back strength of schedule. They only give up 21.1 points per game to opposing running backs. So I've got him just outside the top 24, but it's really a tier thing, right? It starts with Javonte Williams, who gets the Chargers, right? It's just a great matchup for Javonte, and he's been a great player. Then I got Zeke, then I got DeAndre Swift, then I got Damian Harris, then I got Saquon, then I got Carter, then I got Kareem Hunt. So it's really a big tier with a lot of similar players, but I've got them below a tier, that's got, just some of the players that I think are in just better matchups and have a better chance to lead their backfields. So Carter, yes, took over more of an every down role, but you still have Tevin Coleman just being enough of a pain in the ass that if this game goes sideways, and it's a script issue where there's just like only 15 rushing attempts to go around. And if you don't get Zach Wilson checking the ball down to Carter, which he doesn't always do, well, then that's going to be a problem, right, for Carter. So it's just really a matchup.
That's the thing, man. Just that check down point. We talked about the rates, but I actually grabbed the totals, and they're even more alarming. Seven freaking games with a fully healthy Zach Wilson. Marco Carter has 19 targets. 3 extended appearances with Mike White, 26 targets.
Yeah, so it's a philosophical difference in the way that Mike White and the way Zach Wilson approach football.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Yeah, so I mean and one is good, for the running backs. One, like Mike White's more on the spectrum of Alex Smith, right? Whenever we look at Wilson, he really wants to be more of that gunslinger, push it down the field kind of guy. And so the only other player to talk about here is really, so you got Crowder, who's going to be questionable again, did not practice today. Keelan Cole's been out there, but he hasn't been able to do anything. Denzel Mims is just, hoping he can play 50% of the routes. All the tight ends all have COVID as of right now. And not the tight ends have been any good, but we could get Elijah Moore back this week. We'll have to keep an eye on it. He's still on the IR, but he could be activated. What I read earlier today, I don't know if you've seen anything else, Ian. So he's got COVID, but really he was obviously on IR for the quad injury, and I heard he is 50-50 to play. So if Elijah Moore does suit up, and we hear that the COVID thing wasn't an issue and he's able to do his conditioning and everything this week and he's good to go, well then I think he can enter that wide receiver 3 conversation. It's a tough matchup against the Bucs. It's not terrible, but they've been a little bit better here as of late. So if it was a normal Elijah Moore, like it just been healthy this whole time, like he would be in the wide receiver 2s. But I'm going to put him just outside of that if he plays this week. And so just trying to get more information. It's going to be tough. I don't know that we'll get anything concrete on really, where he's at, other than if we see that he gets a couple of full practices in, which guess what? We won't know because they don't have to activate him off the IR. That's what sucks about these guys that are on the short-term IR. They don't have to tell us anything about them unless the beat reporter happens to tell us something.
He is coming back from a quad injury too. It's not like an upper body thing like AJB. And this Buccaneers defense is starting to round the form. Maybe, they beat the crap out of the Panthers. And
they have some issues too. Like one of their cornerbacks went on COVID list yesterday. I think it was Jamel Dean.
These freaking, I can't keep track of all this COVID shit.
Dude, I know. It's killing me.
So, yeah, I would, again, just general rule of thumb with these players on bad offenses, tiebreaker, go with the better squad. But, yes, we did see Elijah Moore do some great things. Any love
just so folks remember, I wouldn't even bring this up if it was like Kadarius Toney, right? We're talking about Elijah Moore, who posted from week 7 through week 13 PPR finishes of 36, 26, 1, 27, 3, 40, and 8. So you get those 3 top 10s. That's why you're even willing to consider it. Like if he had just been in the 25 range that whole time, it just wouldn't even be a conversation. But that 1 finish, the number 3 and the number 8, like that's heady stuff.
If Crowder stays out, if Elijah Moore stays out, is Braxton Berrios in your top 40?
He'll be in my top 50. I was looking at him actually earlier. Like he just hasn't been able to break away from that. Like they just need to get him out there a little bit more. He did handle most of the slot work. Man, I like him. I really like Berrios. It was funny
when kick return tutty last week.
Well, he had a return for a touchdown.
That's why it was a nice kick return touchdown. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was great.
Showed a little burst.
Yeah, no, he's got some bursts. It's funny. As soon as I tweeted it, something about him, like he needs more playing time. Everybody's like New England. I'm like, you guys realize like that's where he started, right? Was New England. That was his first roster.
Oh my gosh.
So anyway,
Dude, the whole Jets thing, man. Crowder, like, first playing over Elijah Moore, even after they made, like, their only good offensive contributor over the past few years, take a pay cut to even stay on the team. And now we got, Braxton Berrios maybe deserving more touches as well. Screw that entire wide receiver room, except for you, Elijah Moore. Eagles at the football team, Philly 3.5-point favorites, game total at 46. Jalen Hurts last week, what did he finish with, like 5 yards rushing? He did not give us anything on the ground, still managed to return a QB 13 finish. Not quite chalking up the QB1 goodness we hoped for, but not a bad floor. And yeah, 2 carries for just 7 yards in that one. Now he gets a Washington defense that last time they met, 8 carries, 38 yards, pair of touchdowns from the goal line. How we threw for 296 yards on just 26 attempts as well. So if you guys caught even, 5 minutes of that Cowboys-Washington game, I think you can see this football team defense isn't in the best place right now. Jalen Hurts starting him with all the confidence in the world. Same cannot be said for Devontae Smith. I get it. He was sick. I would love to see him, in a pass-happy version of this offense. God forbid, and I think Hurts has earned like more time there, but for some reason, if we got like Deshaun Watson or like a true pass-first quarterback in this offense, like Devontae Smith to be a weekly upside wide receiver too. But look, it's just opportunity. He had 7 targets last week. That was the first time he had more than 6 in a game since week 7. So yeah, it's an easy matchup. Bottom 3 defense and PPR points per game allowed to wide receivers. I mean, that didn't stop Smith for going for 40 scoreless yards against them in week 15. So he can turn it around, but like, this is just, in this offense, like one of Devontae Smith or Dallas Goedert will probably have a good game because they're very good players, but the other one is going to have a tough time because there just is only one ball to go around inside the league's most run-heavy offense. So yeah, Goddard, 7 catches, 135 yards against them a few weeks ago, dudded with 28 scoreless yards last week as Devontae goes off. So unless Washington can really force this Eagles offense to put their foot on the gas, man, which really only the Giants have been able to do that for the better part of the last 2 months. Yeah, man, I just don't exactly see both Devontae and Goddard doing a ton here. So not the worst guys to have in your flex, and Goddard's still a low-end tight end 1, just something to keep in mind when an offense is this run-heavy. But that is good news for one Boston Scott, who Dwayne and I talked all about on the Waiver Wire pod. Quick refresher, though, with Miles Sanders out with the broken hand and Jordan Howard also banged up with the stinger, Boston Scott 45% of snaps, 44, 31. Not great in weeks 8 through 10 without Sanders in the picture, but he was able to get 12 carries, 10 carries, then 11 carries and 2 receptions in those games. So obviously, liking this spot as a 3.5-point favorite against this bad defense. Dwayne, if we have Sanders out, we got to see that practice report. It sounds like Howard has a decent enough chance of playing. Let's say Howard plays. Where do you think him and Scott fall? Kind of in that upside RB3 territory, top 30, but not top 24?
Yeah, I have Scott as a low-end RB2 right now, assuming that Howard plays. Okay. And then I've got Howard as my RB29 right now. So
that's fair to widen it a little bit. Yeah.
They're 8 spots apart, right, in my rank. So I do have Boston Scott at the bottom of the tier above Jordan Howard. And the reason why is like Boston Scott is just a more complete player, in my opinion. Like
he's healthier, so.
He's healthier. He can handle passing downs. We've seen him handle carries inside the 5. We know they're going to rotate guys no matter what. Even if Howard's out, they're going to give run to Gainwell. So it's tough to get even if Jordan Howard's out, like I'm not going to push Scott way up, but he'll probably climb to like 14 or 15 in my ranks if Jordan Howard's out. Just because, dude, it's the matchup. They should destroy Washington. I know this 3.5-point line seems really. I
was surprised it was that low. Yeah. I feel like every time I say this, I'm wrong on this podcast, but who knows?
Well, it's at Washington. So typically, on a neutral thing, it's like a 3-point favorite for the home team. So it's almost really, I try to look at this, it's almost like, Vegas is giving them, in a way, 6.5, because it's discounting, the fact that it is a home game for Washington and they're still making Philly favored, So, but yeah, if you have Howard out, I think Boston Scott creeps inside the 15. If we know that Howard's playing, you got him in the low 20s.
On the other side of things,
I said low 20s. I meant low RB2, so like between 20 and 24.
Makes sense to me. On the other side of things, at this point, man, it's Antonio Gibson, and that's really the only guy we can treat with any level of confidence in this offense. What Taylor Heineke has done to Terry McLaurin will not be forgotten anytime soon. That's all I'm going to say. So, Dwayne, what are your expectations here for Antonio Gibson with J.D. McKissic on IR and thus done for the season?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. If you look at the last several weeks, with Gibson, 68%, 78%, of the snaps. And then last week, they really limited him. So I think this turf toe thing, he was a game time decision. He didn't practice all week. So I think we got to keep an eye on that. Let's see what they say about it. And remember, he battled turf toe at the end of the year last year. He said this year it feels different, whatever that means. So with Gibson, I think you're going to see a little bit more of a rotation. And then if the game gets out of hand, you could see him rest him. So I just don't think, before I was like, wow, you got to have him in your top 10 pretty much every week. Any week, that McKissick's out. This week I've got him at 14 right now. And again, these aren't completely done, but I think he's in my tier 3. So with Darrell Williams and Cordarrelle Patterson, Josh Jacobs, Rashad Penny, I've got him with all those guys. I don't have him in the tier above where you have the true every down backs like David Montgomery, Sony Michel, Devin Singletary, Najee Harris. He should belong in that tier, but because of this injury and last week what we saw, he played 37% of the snaps last week. Jarrett Patterson 25%, Jonathan Williams played 40%. Rushing attempts, he handled 30%, Patterson 45%, Jonathan Williams 15%. So he handled half of the 2-minute offense. Jonathan Williams handled half the 2-minute offense. So they're kind of creating a rotation right now. I do think it's driven by the injury to his toe. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. If there's no issues with the toe this week and he's all of a sudden, and I don't think this will be the case, I guarantee you he's listed. But if he's not and he's full practice all week, well, then I'll bump him up a little bit.
Moving right along, Giants at Bears. What a matchup. Chicago, 6-point favorites, game total 37.5. I believe that's the lowest I have seen all season long. PFF's bottom 2 graded quarterbacks in week 16 among 37 qualified players, Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm. This passing attack has not cleared even 200 yards in a game since week 8. And remember, this is January and in Chicago. That's basically what we're working with here. Good God, stay away. Sounded like Dwayne, you got Barkley around that 24-25 spot. At this point, man, just rest him, please. He's not practicing on Wednesday with an ankle injury. Get him out of here, and we can hate ourselves and fire up Booker as a volume-based low-end RB2 as well. But the way things are split right now, it's brutal, man. Okay, I would bet the over on touches at 15 for Barkley, if that Girl Scout shows up again. But I don't want to be in that situation, dude, because the way Booker is involved now and more as a receiver, it is just brutal. And you can watch these games. I get it. Saquon doesn't look the same. We've talked about him and Booker being far too difficult to tell apart. But we're also getting Barkley, throwing a little swing pass and literally all 3 of his receivers in front of him missing their blocks and just giving him absolutely no chance to get free.
It's terrible, man.
It's been a team effort to be this bad. So yeah, close start decisions with Barkley, Tony, anyone in this offense, please, for the love of God, pick the other guy. I was hoping that Tony could maybe, probably not even be a wide receiver 3, but at least be a throw up in your mouth flex play or something like that. But now he's not practicing with a shoulder injury. And after I looked more at the snaps from last week, we still had Kenny Galladay and Darius Slayton as the full-time receivers. Tony coming in more as a situational slot that, they fed him the ball, 9 targets. Didn't work for much because they're the freaking Giants. So again, all these factors going up against them. A Bears defense that, hasn't exactly quit yet. They haven't had the best performances without Khalil Mack, but we have still seen them, notably that Vikings game, hold up relatively strong. Yeah, just avoid the squad, please. Just don't do it. Now, Dwayne, with the Bears, we got one guy, and his name is David Montgomery. It does sound like Allen Robinson will be back this week, but he said that, he doesn't even feel back to his normal self coming back from the COVID as well. So talk about Montgomery and maybe our Darnell Mooney's and Cole Kmets of the world and how we're feeling. And again, a freaking matchup with a game total of 37.5. I can't believe how bad this is.
So gross. But it should equal a lot of touches for Montgomery. I mean, look, Montgomery's an every down back. He's as every down gets. I said that last week. He's out there in the passing downs, he's out there in the short down and distance. They love to check the ball down to him. When they need 20 points, they like to just check it down to David Montgomery all the way down the field and take a 5-minute drive. So it's really awesome if you're a fantasy player for David Montgomery. It doesn't look good for Bears fans, but if you're a fantasy player, you like David Montgomery. He doesn't look particularly special with the ball in his hands. He doesn't look bad. He looks like, an average NFL running back. He's got some lateral agility, not a real great burst or anything to break a bunch of long runs, but he's a decent running back and he's getting the volume, and that's the main thing. You get the game against the Giants. So I've got him inside the top 11. It's a 6.8 out of 10 on the running back strength of schedule. They're favored by 6 points. So I think it's just a spot where, you're going to get the volume for Mountgomery, as Ian says. As far as the rest of the Bears go, we should see Justin Fields back. this week, so we'll have to wait and see for sure, but that would be my guess. So right now I've got him at QB 14, really just based on the fact that, he scrambles a lot, so when we get a quarterback that'll scramble between 10 and 20% of their dropbacks, like that's a good thing. And let's be fair, like Fields has really been, the biggest thing is he just hasn't been able to consistently stay on the field here recently, but just don't forget the stretch of games where we saw him play from week 8 through week 15. In the 5 games he played, I'm gonna exclude week 11 because he got knocked out of that game. But week 8, QB3. Week 9, QB9. Week 14, QB8. Week 15, QB10. So he's basically either a high-end QB2, low-end QB1, depending on what way you want to slice that. If you like the rushing quarterbacks, well, he's a low-end QB1. If you care less about that and care more about matchups, well, he's a high-end QB2. So it's really going to be your call. But I think Fields is someone that we can use. Darnell Mooney, a little bit of a disappointment, Ian. We did see, we got another game where we didn't have Allen Robinson, which in the past, that's really been key for Mooney. So if you look at the games where you haven't had Robinson, he's had finishes of 4, 15, 43, 23, and then last week he bounced back up to 40, but it was Nick Foles under center, not Justin Fields, not Andy Dalton. So a little bit of a curveball there. So I've got Mooney at wide receiver 29 this week. 4 out of 10 on the wide receiver strength of schedule. It's basically a neutral matchup as far as wide receiver points allowed by the Giants in a PPR format, 35.3. And again, they just may not need to throw that much. The Bears are a team that if they don't have to throw, they won't. Matt Nagy wants to shell up like a turtle, as soon as possible. If that can happen in a game, he's very willing to make that his game plan. So I just don't expect, them to really keep the foot on the accelerator, and I don't expect the Giants to force them to in the passing game. So I think that's the thing you got to worry about. The matchup's fine. It's just how much do they really need to throw the ball to beat the Giants?
Chiefs at the Bengals. KC 5-point favorites. Game total of 49.5. Yeah, Tyreek screwed us last week. Just 42% of the offensive snaps, and Patrick Mahomes has come out and said that Tyreek was quote-unquote exhausted out there. He was just trying to do what he could to contribute. Remember, Tyreek didn't get to practice all week long. You would like to think that he'll be closer to the full version of himself after having a full next week to recover. And we have Travis Kelce off the list, and he'll also have an entire week of practice to hopefully ramp up to the best of his capabilities. I get, Dwayne, what we were talking about before. If you have guys in the tier, you're dropping them down. There's no way possible that we can consider benching Hill or Kelce because we think they could be limited because of COVID. So we're not going to do that. So
it's one of those things, Ian, where if they go off on your bench, can you really stand it if you bench Tyreek Hill or Kelce?
I think I would quit my job. I really do. I don't think I could look myself in the mirror and tell if someone's like, "What do you do for a living?" and I'm like, "I'm a fantasy analyst for PFF."
You would be dialing the Girl Scout up, is what you would be doing,
right?
Telling her to come over to the door. And anyway, we'll leave it there.
So just realized Tyreek burned us, but it was on only a 42% snap rate, basically splitting stuff with Mecole Hardman, and that helped Byron Pringle with a team-high 80% snaps go off for those 2 tutties. But we've seen this all year long, man. Pringle, Robinson, Mecole, yeah, they're on the Chiefs' offense. If Mahomes has a good day, any one of them could score. You can throw Josh Gordon in that group too. Marcus Kemp, we've seen weirder things happen, but it usually is just a Tyreek and Travis Kelce show. Try to avoid these other auxiliary pieces as much as possible. Bigger story is with the running back room. Once again, check out that waiver pod for all your top weekly waiver wire information. But with Clyde Edwards-Helaire not practicing with the collarbone injury, it does look like Darrell Williams is set up to be the RB1. He's had 5 spot starts this season, played at least 54% of the snaps in all 5 games. He was over 60 in 3 of them. And man, the touches are smooth. 24, 8, 19, 22, and also 20, with a lot of that coming through the air. Clyde Edwards-Helaire cannot buy more than 3 targets in a game. Darrell gets that each and every time he's out there. So the finishes were solid, man. PPR RB7, 33, 16, 28, and overall RB1 when he had, that 101-yard receiving game where he's out there mossing dudes in the freaking end zone for some reason. So against the Bengals, man, okay, I get it. It's not the biggest smash spot in the world. I think they're actually second-ranked defense in yards before contact allowed per carry. But other than Cowboys Cardinals, this is our second highest game total of the week, expecting a shootout. And that's the problem sometimes with the Bengals and with the Chiefs, just getting an opponent that can actually keep up on the scoreboard and force them to bring out the best of themselves. So Tyreek, Kelce, obviously Mahomes, we're starting all these guys without a second's hesitation. And I think the same pretty much goes for Darrell Williams, Dwayne. So pure top 12 RB, maybe not, but I think we'd really be hard pressed this week to rank more than 14, 15 guys ahead of him. What say you?
Yeah, for sure. I've got him at 15.
There we go. Love when that adds up.
Yeah. I mean, and I've got him just below Antonio Gibson. Like, if Gibson is a DNP all week again, I'm moving Gibson down. Darrell Williams will move ahead of it. It's 8.7 running back strength of schedule out of 10, and it's a 95, the number one on the slate in offensive line run blocking advantage.
Ooh, gotta love that. Now, how about the Bengals, Dwayne? Coming off one of the best offense performances of the season. Now, it was against a bunch of JVers on the Baltimore Ravens defense, doing their best out there. Now they get a Chiefs defense that really, ever since the first 5-6 weeks of the year, has been one of the league's better overall units. So still got, some question marks. Rashard Fenton is on the COVID list, some other guys to keep an eye on as well. But man, we got a lot of options here to fire up with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, so the plus for Burrow is if you look at quarterbacks against man coverage this year, he grades as the highest PFF quarterback. So if you at least have 120 dropbacks versus man coverage. And so he is number one on the list with a grade of 90.3. He has 1,370 yards and 15 passing touchdowns against man coverage. What do the Chiefs like to utilize? 35% of the time they run man coverage. 36% over the last 6 weeks. So they're actually, from a man coverage standpoint, that is actually, where did the Chiefs rank? That is the eighth most in the league. So one of 8 teams that are over the 35%, almost 36% mark on utilizing man coverage. And they consistently use it every single week. They're not one of these teams that bounce around. They are what they are. Like, their man coverage, 31%, 37%, 34%, 32%, 45%. It's always up over 30%. So he's going to get plenty of looks, Burrow. It is a good defense. Quarterback strength of schedule is a 0.7. out of 10, not a 7 out of 10, a 0.7. So closer to a 0. So that could be problematic. Offensive line pass blocking advantage is minus 34. But I don't care, to be honest. Look, I said this a couple weeks ago with Burrow, and he didn't do well, if you think about it. And that was against the Broncos, who are another heavy man coverage team. They really played well against the Bengals, and honestly, the Bengals. That game, just the way that game script kind of played out, it didn't work out right. But anytime you get these receivers and they're going to get singled up, I like the idea of it, Ian. I just feel you give me T. Higgins, you give me Jamar Chase, you even give me Tyler Boyd, and you're going to give me man coverage across the board against these guys, 1 out of every 3 plays, maybe more every game. Every play, I'm down. I want all of that I can get. So I have Burrow still in my top 10 for the week, despite the tough matchup. It is, like you mentioned, one of the better matchups on the slate. I expect to see a lot of people using this game for DFS purposes, especially after all the double stacks paid off for everyone on the planet last week, with the Bengals. Just remember, with the Bengals, it is a team that was the first time really all season where we got a true look at the Bengals team we all hoped we would get, which is a pass-heavy team utilizing all of these weapons. Last week, they only trailed by 4 points or more on 14% of the plays. They led by 4 or more 72% of the time, and they threw the ball 72% of the plays. Previously in the season, when they've led by that much, they've thrown the ball 44%, they threw the ball 55%, and they threw the ball 47%. So whenever they've been able to lead in the past, they've really clammed up and they've decided just to run the ball. They didn't do that last week. Last week, I don't know if it was just a matchup thing because Ravens run so much man coverage and they just knew all of their top corners are out. So oh, you guys are going to keep running man with all these scabs out here. We're just going to throw it every play. I kind of think that's what happened. So it'll be interesting, just to see what this offense does this week. But I think Joe Mixon will be plenty involved. I've got him at running back 5 for the week. It's a 7 out of 10 on the running back strength of schedule. They give up 24.2 points in a PPR to opposing running backs. And I have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase both inside my top 10 because you just have to. You can't not have these two guys inside your top 10, even though the wide receiver strength of schedule is not good. It's a 1.7 out of 10. T. Higgins does have a 70.2 on the wide receiver cornerback matchup rating, which the way our tool works, it basically we look at it and we basically try to assign how often we think T. Higgins is going to see each cornerback, right? From the Chiefs, and then you get a cumulative score based on where Higgins lines up the most, like left, slot, or right, and then how the Chiefs deploy their cornerback. So it's a 70.2. Jamar Chase's is a little tougher. It's a 37.3. So Chase's looks tougher, but again, he's a superhero, Ian. So I just don't care too much whenever we have superheroes. So fine, like let's push him towards the bottom of tier 1. He can't be in the middle of tier 1. That might be the way you have to look at Jamar Chase. This weekend, Tyler Lockett, man, has been better.
And Lockett, huh?
Yeah, Tyler Lockett, God, Tyler Boyd, yeah. Tyler Boyd. We finally saw a week where all three of them got to be, inside the top 24, Ian. So it happened.
Week 16, we made it.
we got it in there. So with Boyd, I've got him more as that low-end wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 4.
It's been great. He's gotten wide receiver 9, wide receiver 17. Like, my few remaining best ball squads. Very thankful for that, Tyler. But yeah, man, this came on. He's great. They throw him the ball. Good things happen. But that's true for Chase and Higgins. We've seen him be reduced to the clear-cut number 3 option. He's not going to keep ripping off these 60-yard touchdowns every single week. Maybe he does it again. But yeah, you're taking a much bigger chance with Boyd than Higgins or Chase. And you know what, everyone? It's okay to just appreciate Chase and Higgins. They're both studs. Like, I see this happen with CD and Cooper all across the league, man.
Yeah,
like,
I hate that we have to pit them against one another all the time.
Pollard and Zeke, like, people just can't be like, oh, wow, this one NFL team has 2 players the same position. And guess what, Dwayne? Like, they're both pretty damn good.
What's funny is people are still ignoring Higgins. They're like, no. And I'm just like, they're both great. Let's just call it what it is. But people have to say, well, Jamar Chase is better. I'm like, okay, well, how much better? Like by like a hair? Like, okay, whatever. Like they're still both top 10 wide receivers.
I don't think Joe Burrow cares which one's better. I think he's just happy to have them both out there. And Burrow, I kind of mentioned this in another game earlier, but truly it's been so incredible what he's done this year. So aesthetically pleasing because he's first in adjusted completion rate out of everyone, and he has the league's 8th highest average target depth among 32 qualified quarterbacks. So throwing downfield, and he's doing it more accurately than just about anyone.
For people saying that we wouldn't see pocket passers anymore, eat your heart out. Joey Burrow, pocket passer, torching it.
Bro, with Burrow and Herbert coming to the league same time,
it's
I'm very
so funny how quickly people jump ship on stuff. Like we have a couple of bad draft classes, we don't have we've got more mobile quarterbacks, so that's good. But all of a sudden it means that we're not that the day of the pocket passer is over. Like it's just funny, like how quickly everybody wants to assume that this new trend is like the thing that will take over the entire NFL forever.
For the end of time, Dwayne, maybe this will be the week that we see something that changes in the next 30 years. Who knows? Rams at the Ravens. LAR, 3.5-point favorites, game total of 46.5. So last week was atrocious. It was like Matt Stafford, being the Scooby-Doo villain. You take off the mask and it's just like Detroit Lions, Matthew Stafford. Again, it was brutal. 32nd in PFF passing grade. But the previous 3 weeks, he was top 6. So he has kind of had some Jameis Winston, 2021 Josh Allen to him, where he's been really freaking good sometimes, and then also awfully bad in some other occasions. But hey, still managed to get that W. Fed Cooper Kupp to a big day, and Odell Beckham got his 4th score of the year. For those keeping count at home, that is more touchdowns than Baker Mayfield has to wide receiver since the Browns decided to part ways with the ex-Giants stud. Now, the big story, though, of course, is Cooper Kupp. Because Stafford, yes, in this spot against this freaking secondary, they will be getting Jimmy Smith and Chris Westry back from the COVID list. But come on, Humphreys, Peters still out of the picture. And with these guys trying to play man coverage against Kupp, Beckham, and company, good luck with that. So Stafford, certainly, in play as a low-end QB1. And Cooper Kupp, man, let's see him put together the best wide receiver season ever, because he has a chance. Most fantasy points per game in a season over the last 50 years. Number 1 is Jerry Rice, 1987. He had 26.2. Cooper Kupp is at 26.1 right now. If he goes bonkers 2 more weeks, has a true chance to put forward the most productive season ever from a receiver. 3rd place, 1995, Jerry Rice. 4th place, 2020, Devontae Adams. I'm still Team Moss over Rice because I'm an ignorant millennial, but that's just my personal choice, and you all need to accept that. Anyway, Kupp, wide receiver 1, of course. OBJ, Van Jefferson, they're upside wide receiver 3s in a great matchup and a great passing game. Exact same rationale we had last week when they were facing the Vikings, also applies to this. Again, great spot against a Ravens D that has been shredded by Burrow and Aaron Rodgers over the past 2 weeks. And then we have Sony Michel, who, man, can't rank him high enough. Touches in his 5 starts this year, 23, 27, 20, 20, and 28. Dwayne, I saw the PFF Fantasy account did a quote graphic quote graphic where you were saying, start him, forget about it, don't look at it again. Yes, start Sony Michel, don't look at it again. If you guys want to use that same quote that Dwayne used and just put my name on it instead, that's fine.
But put the pregnant pause in there before again.
Exactly. I got to work on my delivery to, really get the social media man.
I love how you do your pause when you say, man. Like, is that a hat tip to like the Big Lebowski? I've always wanted to ask you.
I don't know, man.
Because that's what he does. He'll be like, it's like this thing, man.
I do it in my tweets as a tribute to him, but in real life, I don't know. Maybe that's just my.
I think you have it nailed. Like you got the Jeff Bridges thing going on that. So good job.
Thanks. All right. Shout out Cam Akers, probably returning. I have no idea how. I'd be shocked if he gets more than a touch or two, but that's just so awesome. And it's exciting, man. It was funny when I was talking to Matt Kelly on this pod, 10 questions, a couple of weeks ago. He started going so in depth about, why Achilles were going to be reasonable to fix and how he's actually more concerned when a running back has like a foot injury. I think he was saying like Travis Etienne's issue is more concerning to him than Cam Akers. And I was like, Matt, you're not a doctor. Like, how the hell do you know all this? And he brought up how he had stem cells put into his knee recently. So he's asking, he said he left the doctor's office and he wasn't thinking about like his personal health. He was like, how can I use all this stuff the doctor just told me to, go make some dynasty deals and try to get ahead on that. So, we'll monitor Cam Akers and stuff. It's going to make for some very interesting offseason talk about this Rams backfield. But for now, again, all you guys need to know is to start Sony Michel in leagues of all shapes and sizes. Tyler Higbee, touchdown dependent, tight end 2 that doesn't really find the end zone all that often these days. So, hey, all these receivers, including Tyler Higbee, who we actually saw last week make a couple catches out wide, lined up as a true wide receiver. Yeah, they're playing the Ravens. I could see it happening. I would still certainly try to, prioritize guys like a Gerald Everett, like, even probably Foster Moreau at this point with no Waller over Tyler Higbee. So, Dwayne, the one good thing with the Ravens, seems like Lamar Jackson has a chance of coming back, but even if he doesn't, man, we've seen Tyler Huntley and Josh Johnson keep the ship afloat. Obviously, we want the healthy and best version of Lamar under center, but it's good to see guys like Hollywood, Bateman, the running backs, even if it's not the most consistent production. I mean, we've seen what other offenses look like with the backup quarterbacks. Credit to the Ravens for staying competitive, even with so much going wrong under center.
Yeah, I mean, and like throwing the ball, like they're on pace now to throw the ball 14% more than they did last year. Last year, they dropped back to throw 50% of the time. This year, they're sitting at 64%, almost 65% on the season. So a big shift, right, for the Ravens offense this year. Now, some of that was driven by the injuries early in the season with linemen, running backs. They've had defenders hurt, all sorts of stuff has helped lead to this kind of tsunami. I don't think we'll see the same thing next year. I think we know now, right, that you can throw the ball more in Baltimore and that they've built their team to do that. That's why they've drafted, in the first round, Marquise Brown. Then they've also drafted Rashad Bateman in the first round. You got a high draft pick spent on Mark Andrews. And so it's just a situation where we know they've got the weapons and they have the capability to pass. This year, they're just having to. I've got Jackson right now. It does sound like he's going to have a shot to play. It is a tough matchup against LA. Quarterback strength of schedules of 1.1. Offensive line pass blocking advantage back to some of those injuries. A minus 58 versus the LA Rams defensive front. So that's going to be problematic for Jackson. But again, he still has his legs. Seems to, be fine as far as, delivering the ball, 40 times a game. Like it's just, he's in a good spot, from that standpoint. We've got a game that should be competitive. We've got a game that both teams really want to win. So I think that's a great thing at this point because this slate, man, oh my God, there are some terrible games. We love fantasy football. It's kind of been this way for about 3 or 4 weeks now. But when I looked at it, like the first thing you do, I don't know about you, Ian, I'm like, okay, how many 50s do we have? Like, and then you look at the opposite, like how many below 40s do we have? And usually a lot of weeks, like 42 will be like your lowest, this week, I think we have 2 below 40. Yeah, we do. We've got the New Orleans, Carolina game. You got the Chicago Giants game are both below 40. So yeah, it's kind of nasty. So you love to see these games like this where you get the Rams and you get the Ravens, you get the Cowboys and the Cardinals, the Bengals and the Chiefs. Those are really good matchups that we're all looking forward to. So I've got Lamar Jackson aside. My top 4, I mean, the superstar, right, of this offense is Mark Andrews. Over the last 7 games, here are his tight end finishes: 3, 5, 4, 13, 2, 2, 1. Pretty good. Pretty good, right?
Pretty good.
He's the tight end one on the season right now, not Travis Kelce. So Mark Andrews, like just balling out, like more route, the routes thing that we saw early in the season, like it all came, to fruition. Like he's just out there, career high rates, seeing career high targets. All this stuff is it's great for Mark Andrews. So if you got him, you're firing him up. I don't need to tell you that. I've got him inside my top 3 this week. I still have Marquise Brown ahead of Rashad Bateman. He's still seeing more of the routes. I know he hasn't come through really in the box score like in a big way in the last several games, but he's still seeing enough targets and they are throwing the ball enough. I mean, if you look at his routes over the last 3 games, 95%, 94%, 93%, targets 19%, 38%, 24%. So Marquise Brown, these aren't like 10 target games. They're like 6 and 7 target games, but like he's still a game breaker. Like he can catch a ball underneath and still take it to the house. He can beat anyone over the top. Like he's one of these few players, like I don't doubt that it'll just be something we'll look up and be like, oh, wow, there's Marquise Brown, back in the top, having a top 5 week. Like that's totally in his range of outcomes. And I think some people have just soured on him too much. I think it's fine if you want to push him down your ranks some. But this is a player that we know can get loose at any moment. Not a great matchup for him either, though. Wide receiver strength of schedule is a 1 out of 10. Wide receiver cornerback matchup is a 7.4 this week. So remember with Brown, though, the big thing is like where he really comes through is against zone coverage. The Rams use a ton of zone coverage. So if you look at Marquise Brown, his targets per route run versus man coverage is only 18%. Mark Andrews is 29%. When you go to zone coverage, 25% targets per route run for Marquise Brown. You're going to see mostly zone coverage this weekend from the Rams. So I think even though it's a tougher matchup, this is the kind of situation that could really be good for Brown. Could kind of give him an opportunity to, have one of those 7-8 catch days, maybe get you 100 yards and hopefully get you a touchdown. As far as the backs go, we talked about Freeman a couple times over the last 2 weeks, so I won't spend much time. But he's just been downgraded because he's not seeing that 60 to 65% of the work anymore. He's more around, right at the 50% range. And then when you look at the rushing attempts, having to share one with some of Latavius Murray, you got, obviously whichever quarterback is in handling, 20 to 30% of the design rushing attempts, especially, if it's Lamar Jackson. It just takes the top off for Freeman. So I've got him as an RB3 this week against the Rams.
Real quick, just on that suddenly high Marquise Brown floor we've had really, over the past 2 months. Most consecutive games, active streaks of 5+ receptions right now. Cooper Kupp's gone 19 straight, which is bonkers. Second place is Deontay Johnson all the way down at 10. At 8, we have Marquise Brown and Devontae Adams. Nobody else has a streak longer than 4.
Yeah. See, people forget, man. That's a great one. I like that you pulled that.
I like you, man. I appreciate that. Texans at the 49ers. San Fran, 12.5-point favorites. Game total about 44.5. Already kind of broke down that rookie QB study I did. But yeah, Davis Mills, you have a legit argument to say he's been the second best rookie quarterback this season. Just realize it's still pretty hard to say that he's been a top 30 NFL quarterback in that same stretch. So it's been fun. Let's just not get carried away. Brandon Cooks remains the only viable fantasy option in this passing game. And even then, man, boomer bust wide receiver 3. And to your point, Dwayne, tiebreakers, I'm not going to pick him coming off the COVID list being on there last week. Again, 5 offenses this week implied to score 16 or fewer points. Jaguars, Falcons, Panthers, Giants, and the Texans. Don't be afraid to fade pretty much those entire offenses unless we can get a featured running back, which was the case with Rex Burkhead. But man, first time all year a Houston running back finished better than the RB20, and that was against the freaking Chargers, who usually just let you run the ball to your heart's desire. Now we got the San Francisco 49ers, number 1 defense in yards before contact allowed per carry. Nick Bosa and company, a little bit harder to get through. I believe Joey was out last week. That'll make my argument. All right, cool. That makes my argument a lot stronger. Nick, Baby Bear in there. I think that's what they called each other, Big Bear, and probably not Baby Bear. That's kind of a weird name for a
Little Bear.
Yeah, I think it was Little Bear. Nick Bosa, one of the best defensive ends in the freaking league, being called Baby Bear would just be kind of weird.
Yeah, well, if you've seen their dad, he was like the biggest one.
Dude, I used to write for SB Nation's Ohio State blog, Land Grant, Holy Land, and Papa Bosa was just always commenting on stuff. Like anyone that said anything remotely, which come on, you'd have to go out of your way to say something wrong about Nick and Joey, but that is one proud Papa with how those kids have been playing. By those kids, I mean those monsters that would eat me without thinking twice. So with all that said, I am not trying to get Rex Burkhead go back to that well. If David Johnson is again again out of the picture. Okay, but look, we've seen these 15 touches go to Rex Burkhead more weeks than not and just lead to an RB3 and RB4 finish. I will not be ranking him inside my top 24.
And you don't mean overall RB3, RB4. You mean like
yes.
RB3 as in 36.
Yeah, and I feel like we've explained it sometimes, but typical 12-man league, RB1, 1 through 12, RB2, 13 through 24, 25 through 36, and so on and so on. So no, Rex Burkhead has not had multiple RB3 finishes this year, overall speaking, of
That's
course.
a different simulation that no one's plugged into.
Now, Dwayne, with the 49ers, it seemed like as of yesterday that Trey Lance was going to be the favorite to start, but now we got Jimmy G opening his big mouth, telling reporters that he definitely thinks he'll have a chance to play Sunday, and he feels, quote-unquote, confident in it happening. So we're either going to have Trey Lance running around like a chicken with his head cut off, doing only good things for Trey Lance, not so much for everyone else, or we're going to have Jimmy Garoppolo banged up with the thumb. It was good to see Elijah Mitchell come back to practice. But, Dwayne, what are you doing with these, the Brandon Ayuk's and George Kittles? Because we know the running backs can get touches. We know Deebo Samuel, whether it's rushing or receiving, will get fed the ball. But, how do we approach these complimentary guys, again, with either Lance and a even more run-heavy offense than usual against the Texans defense that we're not expecting them to have many problems with, or Jimmy G, but an injured version?
Yeah, so for me, I think what this does, the way I've handled it so far, is I've just really pushed Ayuk out of being startable. He could be a flex play, right? But he's not inside the top 36. I think there's enough question that if Garoppolo plays and he's hurt, or if we get Trey Lance come out there and play, who just didn't look good early in the season as far as throwing the ball. Neither one of those situations are great. I don't see a way to really get off of Deebo Samuel, right, or George Kittle. Obviously, if you've got those players, you're going to play them. Deebo, the positive is, like you talked about, he's been seeing about 20%, of the design rushing attempts. But over the last 2 weeks, we've really seen his target shares pop again, 22% and 35% for Deebo. So I think you're going to play Deebo no matter what. I'll still have him probably right at 11 or 12. I do think that if Trey Lance plays, which I still lean that way. I know what Jimmy G said today. I just, it's a grade 3 strain. So, we'll have to see. But man, your thumb is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's not like trying to get through with your middle finger or your index finger. And those are all hard enough, or a pinky. All of them matter, but your thumb is the only finger on the opposing side of the ball.
Yeah.
So if that's not working right, that's going to be a problem. And I don't see how they're going to brace it. I don't think they can brace it. And him still have a grip or be able to grip the ball. My guess is he'll be wearing a glove and they'll see what's going to happen. But I still lean to probably Trey Lance playing this week. And if we see that, if you look back at the games where we saw Trey Lance get more playing time, he handled in week 5 44% of the designed rushing attempts. 44%, 30% is huge. 44% is astronomical. So I think we would probably plan on seeing Lance get somewhere between 25 and 35%. Don't know we'd see a 44% again, but it is the second most run heavy team in the NFL already. So we would probably see them just get a little bit more run heavy. I think it does hurt the ceiling for Kittle. I think it does hurt the ceiling for Samuel. I think all of their ceilings are hurt this week, period, regardless of which quarterback starts. I think the guy that has the most to gain, based on the way this goes, is if Jimmy G can start, and Elijah Mitchell gets to play. I think that's big for Mitchell because, he'll get to handle somewhere between 60 and 70% of the rushing attempts. It's a 9.9 out of 10 running back strength of schedule. Offensive line run block advantage is an 81. Implied points 28.25, 12.5 point favorites, right? So it should be a game where the 49ers are getting to do what they love to do, freaking just run the damn ball. And so if Elijah Mitchell's back, he's a top 6 back this week if he plays. And I trust him at this point. He's been out long enough, Ian, that when he comes back, I'm trusting that he's healthy. Right. We know Shanahan has shown a propensity in the past to play injured players. And then we're like, what the fuck? Sorry. No, we're trying to get better about this. What the hell, dude? Why'd you tell us you're going to use this guy? And then just really we can't get anything out of him. Or you just, they play the first quarter and then get re-injured. So Mitchell is the one with the most to gain. Now, I'm not going to fade him too much if Lance, if we're for sure that Lance is the starter. I think he's still a top 10. I just think Lance gets a little bit more. And Lance obviously has a lot to gain. All those numbers I just said, and then you pair that with, the design rushing attempts Lance is going to see. Like, it could be a 100-yard rushing day. I think I want to hear your thoughts on it, Ian, because I think folks like are getting a little out of hand with it on Twitter. And I'm not saying they're wrong. Like, I get the thesis, right? We all understand the thesis of, rushing the ball is the cheat code for quarterbacks. But Trey Lance looked terrible the last time we saw him throwing a forward pass. Like, it was bad. It was worse than Jalen Hurts. I don't want to say it was Tebow bad, but it was really, really bad. Now, look, this is a guy coming, from a situation where he hadn't played really a ton of high-level football. So, like, you want to give him time to transition. So I'm not saying Trey Lance can never be good. I just worry, has he improved enough? Look, they don't even use him at all anymore. At the early part of the season, like, let's have some packages for him. They just got rid of all that. They're just like, no, let's just not have Trey Lance on the field. That's probably really our best option, is to not have him out there. And so I've seen some recommendations to basically start him over anyone, like not named Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. But after that, folks saying, yeah, I'm starting him over Aaron Rodgers, starting him over Jalen Hurts, starting him over Tom Brady. I think that's just I think that's too much. I get the idea of what Lance's upside could be, especially in this matchup against Houston. But Houston has come to play a few times this year against other good teams. And I think there is a downside to Lance that you don't have to take on with Aaron Rodgers, right? I think Jalen Hurts has proven it enough times now in a great matchup against Washington. Like, why would I force that?
Oops. Almost knocking my mic over. I'm so freaking happy to get in this conversation. Yeah, look, I see people saying like, oh, what about Lamar Jackson versus Trey Lance if Lamar comes back? Like, no, we got to go with Lamar here, people. As someone, treat him like Taysom Hill. I think that's basically what it comes down to. He is a borderline QB1 that if I have someone like Joe Burrow, like Matthew Stafford, like Aaron Rodgers, a pocket guy that I know is like actually a good to great NFL quarterback, had to throw the good in there for Stafford. But with those guys, like, yeah, I'm going to be taking them over Lance. But once we go Lance versus, the Tannehills, the Derek Carrs, even like, I think I'd take him over Justin Fields most likely.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. Here's who I have him. I have him at 12.
Okay, so, I think 12 is perfect.
Yeah, so I have him below Brady, Prescott, Burrow, Herbert, Stafford, Hurts. I have him below all of those guys, but above Taysom Hill, above Justin Fields, above Kirk Cousins, above Russ Wilson, all those guys.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think that's perfect. Quarterback 12, Trey Lance. Don't freak out, but yeah, be happy about it. QB 12.
I think it's kind of back to what you talked about earlier. Like, sometimes we just like want to jump to these things so fast, especially with young players, right?
Yeah.
It's like we want to crown the next thing because, and let's face it, we've been grinding a long season. A lot of content creators have. And so when you get an opportunity to talk about somebody new like this, especially a rookie that a lot of people were excited about early in the season, I think the natural inclination is like you've got all this bottled up, like, energy around this player you're so excited about. And now all of a sudden you're going to get to see him. And I think you just have to be careful to not let that overly, just affect your view or weight too heavily. And all the other data points we now have, since before the season started, whenever we liked Trey Lance.
I know what you're saying, though, about Lance as a passer. I mean, it looked like the guy's never thrown a touch pass in his entire life. There was some funky quote that a coach had earlier this year. It was like, this guy can throw like a watermelon through a keyhole or something like that. Maybe that was it. But that's what I think of with Trey Lance. That's not a quote. It is now. I think that's what Trey Lance would try to do if given the opportunity. Enough of that, though. Broncos at the Chargers. Chargers 6.5-point home favorites. Game total 45.5. Your Denver Broncos. Teddy Bridgewater most of the time. Drew Lock last week. Under 250 passing yards in every game since week 6. I'm going to list off some of these wide receiver finishes since the week 11 bye so we can see what we're working with. Tim Patrick, who's now on the COVID list. Wide receiver 67, 87, 74, 19, and 85. Cortland Sutton, 81, 69, 89, 85, and 62. Well, if they're not doing good, Dwain, it must mean Jerry Jeudy's balling out. Not so fast, my friend. 71, 27, 50, 114, and most recently 51. Don't start him. Can't do it. If Tim Patrick's out of the picture, okay. But man, they're coming from Drew Lock most likely. As much as I appreciate Drew Lock being an entertainingly bad quarterback, sometimes it wasn't last week, and I'm pissed at him about that. Please don't be trusting Broncos receivers or tight ends for that matter on Championship Sunday. If it was Noah Fant, if it was Albert O, if we could, again, I think I mentioned this before, get a bad Disney movie and combine them to one person every week, tight end one. Unfortunately, we can't make that happen in this short of time. So Fant has barely out-targeted Albert O, 22-17 since the team's week 11 bye. Neither guy deserves to be ranked as a top 15 option this week. Truly, do me a favor, find a better tight end here. I mean, last week, man, this was just rough because as much as I would want to say these running backs even like, okay, we got the Chargers. We just saw Rex freaking Burkhead run all over these guys. This should be a great matchup for Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. When it's Drew Lock under center, man, like what was wrong with that Raiders matchup last week? That was a similarly terrible run defense and they couldn't get anything going. It was actually the first time since week 6 that neither Melvin Gordon nor Javonte Williams managed to post a top 24 finish. So I can see it happening. I can see Javonte and Melvin establishing it. They ran all over the Chargers in their last matchup. You know, Herbert had a rough time keeping up in that one. Maybe they can get a lead even with Drew Lock under center and just be able to run out the clock in this one. And both guys are doing well, but I just have no confidence in the current state of this overall offense. So Gordon and Williams, they're going to be right where they kind of are every week, man, right on that RB2 borderline. And I don't think neither guy is really someone that needs to be jammed into fantasy lineups. Now, if one of them happens to miss time, then you need to start the other one no matter what. Just doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. So running backs, okay enough, borderline RB2s. Other than that, fade this offense, please. Now, Dwayne, with the Chargers, Josh Palmer did some good things for everyone last week, but that was with Jalen Guyton out and Mike Williams out. I've seen Guyton already come back. We'll see if Mike Williams is able to get back in time. But how worried are you about the Keenan Allen dud, and why are you not worried at all?
Yeah, I mean, look, these things happen. You know, I mean,
they do.
It happens. So like Keenan Allen is still like the top target on the Chargers. It's like he's in the top 12. Look, Denver's a good defense. You know, they're only giving up 31.7 points to opposing wide receivers. That's one of the tougher marks on the slate. You know, I mean, you got Philly giving up 27.3 against Terry McLaurin. You got Russell Gage facing Buffalo, 25.7. I mean, so it's not quite as bad as those, but it's rough. But again, it's a pass-first offense. They don't care if they're leading, if they're close, if they're trailing. They want to throw the ball more than they're going to run the ball. And really, that's the way their offense is built. Like, they've got a good quarterback. Their running back, like, he's a good running back, but he's really an even better receiver out of the backfield. So I think they're going to continue to throw the ball, and Keenan Allen's going to continue to be the lead target on the team. And you just roll with it. You know, it doesn't matter what the matchup really looks like. I can't imagine a way to get Keenan Allen on a bench in championship weekend. Like, there's no way. You can't do it. As far as the rest of the receivers go, like Mike Williams, like I'm assuming he's going to get to play at this point with the new COVID rules, you know, since all we have to do is just trust Mike Williams telling us that he's ready to play football. So I'm guessing we're going to see him out there. But look, I mean, the thing with Mike Williams, like, it's really interesting. Like what we saw early in the season, I felt like he was my biggest miss. But now, since like week 6, like he's had finishes of, now he had a knee injury in here, but 73, 79, 46, 45, 10, 50, 20, 39, 46. He's just a freaking boom bust wide receiver 3. Like he's always been, despite having a great quarterback, despite being in an offense that throws the ball more. They don't prioritize him in the passing game. His targets per route run have just dropped over the season. His target share has just dropped dramatically over the season. So Mike Williams is a guy that if you want to find a way to introduce him, you know, to your bench, if most of you probably already have. And I think that's fine. You know, if you're playing in a situation where you've got to start, 4 receivers, Mike Williams is going to play. If you're playing in a 10-team league, with 2 receivers and you don't have to flex receiver, like there's a good chance Mike Williams doesn't need to be in your lineup. And I think that's fine. So he's still going to be in my wide receiver 3 territory. Not a great matchup, like I said, this week. But it's really more just about Mike Williams hasn't done much. And I think the door is wide open for Josh Palmer, honestly, next year, Ian, to really do nice things. With Palmer, we've seen him last week with Williams out, wide receiver 22. Guyton was also out. Wide receiver 15 the week that we had Keenan Allen out. And what was interesting is he played Keenan Allen's role, not Mike Williams. So Josh Palmer, a name to remember for Dynasty. If Mike Williams is active and Jalen Guyton are active, you can't use Josh Palmer this week. Right now, I've got him setting at 56, just to kind of keep him, where I've got my eyes on him, and then I'll move him up or down from there based on where the rest of the news goes. So if Williams were to be out, though, like Palmer would be borderline wide receiver. He would be up there in that wide receiver 3 conversation. if we see Mike Williams out of the game. As far as Austin Eckler, you folks don't need me to tell you, like, Austin Eckler's awesome. Justin Jackson playing Austin Eckler was even awesome. Was awesome. But I expect this to really be mostly Eckler. The one thing I think we could see though now, Ian, maybe Justin Jackson is it. Like, he is just the next guy with Eckler. Like, do we really need to see Josh Kelly or Larry Roundtree the third? Like, I would
be fine if I never saw Joshua Kelly touch a football ever again.
It's aggressive. Let's hope he doesn't come on the show next year. You have to give him the Mike Davis treatment. So with Eckler, got him in the top 3 this week. I've got Justin Jackson sitting at RB 37 this week. So I mean, look, he's an RB 3. He's in tier 5 with names like Foreman, Devonta Freeman, AJ Dillon, Tony Pollard, Jamal Williams. Like, he's in there with all those guys. So I'm interested to see how they use Jackson this week. What I'd like to see is 60% Eckler, 40% Jackson. We don't need the third guy involved. Right. Like, because I think if you get that, like, it could almost be like a Zeke Pollard thing, right? You could get a little mileage out of Jackson. It's late in the season. Look, we're playing for fantasy championships this weekend, so it's not like we have a lot of time, but I'm a nerd, and so I'm allowed to be interested in these things.
We saw Eckler and Gordon in 2019. Even after Gordon came back, they were great. Now, I know Gordon more pure early down guy compared to Jackson, right. But yeah, man, if it's just 2, they could enable 2 guys.
Yeah, and it's a good enough offense that you could. So let's see what happens. And I don't even know Jackson's status. My guess is, like, I can't remember. I feel like they re-signed him to a 1-year deal. I can't remember, but we'll keep an eye on it. Like, I think he showed a little something. Like, Jackson's always had something to his game. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Yeah. As far as the tight ends go, there's really nothing here. Like, Jared Cook, we've talked about it. Like, he hasn't been able to string him. One, he's not playing enough. He's not even usually out there for 70% of the routes. Even with Donald Parham out, it wasn't enough to really give Jared Cook any kind of a boost. So just a player you're not looking to play.
Lions at the Seahawks. Seattle 7-point favorites, even though Adrian Peterson has been put on IR. I'm not sure if they're still in win now mode.
The Seahawks are 7-point favorites, and I don't even believe it against the Lions.
But how does that work, man? Like, they were in win now mode when they signed AP. So now that he's on IR, is that like, are they in lose now mode? I'm not exactly sure. Game total.
I'll 42. Tell you what mode they've been in. Let's run under 50 plays. They've been in that mode all season.
I don't think anything pisses you off more during the course.
I think they have, like, how when you see the Patriots all running out of the locker, everybody taps the "do your job" sign. When you run out of the Seahawks, it's got like this less than 50 play sign. Everybody's got to tap it. Like, yeah, we're all in. Everybody's committed, Ian.
I can just see, like, Dwain, the family, having a nice night, and then all of a sudden starts pulling a laptop. Mr. McFarland's like, Dwain, don't do it. Don't you pull up those Seattle play charts. We're having a good time. You don't want to ruin it. But
I did have somebody on Twitter ask me when I did the tweet, look, it's crazy, man. Like, they're gonna run, like I just did the Lebowski. It's crazy, man. They're gonna run 2 games less worth of plays than the average NFL offense. Like, that's just, you can't do this to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. It's not
two full games is.
It's not humane. It's not humane, and it's a major downer on their fantasy value. Like, these guys basically have to play 2 games less than the average team. It's nuts.
It should honestly be illegal in continental America as well as Puerto Rico. So
it's ridiculous.
With Detroit, apparently DeAndre Swift has come back. He's practicing in full on Wednesday. Here's the thing. One guy I respect in this industry, he works for Fantasy Points. He's been on this podcast, Dr. Edwin Porras at FB Injury Doc. He tweeted this on Christmas Eve. If the Lions haven't tested it, because there was a quote from Dan Campbell last week saying, today will tell a lot. I would tell you the last 2 days he looked pretty good. He looked even better yesterday, but it's about the contact today, so we'll just kind of assess that and feel how they determine that afterwards. So Edwin's point was, if the Lions haven't tested out the shoulder with some contact, it's really hard seeing Swift play. And this was last week where he did not play. If he does, I'm worried for a re-aggravation again. So that's kind of the thing, man. It's a shoulder injury. We saw Jamal Williams come back and really split stuff with Craig Reynolds, who wasn't thought to be part of this equation before Jamal originally got put on the COVID list. That's what I'm saying, man. So I don't, like, with DeAndre Swift, I just kind of want to treat him almost like you said with Brandon Cooks. I just want to put him low enough so that we're probably not going to be starting him as more than maybe borderline RB2 flex type. I get it. We're going to get to you hit a certain point at the running back position. And you're like, all right, I can't really keep moving this guy down the list any further. So I'm not saying I'm going to be ranking 30, 40 guys ahead of DeAndre Swift. But man, any sort of close start sit question, I just think there's so much risk of re-aggravation or the Lions rightfully looking at this and saying, hey, we have Jamal, we have Craig Reynolds. What are you doing giving potentially, 20 touches to DeAndre Swift? So we'll see what happens. And let's also remember, it's not like DeAndre Swift this year was some kind of world beater that was just, living on high-end efficiency every game. We were calling him the Jalen Hurts of running backs because every single fourth quarter with the Lions getting killed, they'd just be checking the ball down to him the whole time. So will that still be Swift, or could we see Godwin out there doing that? I don't know, man. So like Dwayne, 15 combined carries for targets for Swift. I would take the under.
Yeah, I think you have to. I think they're going to keep it a three-way backfield. I think you're going to see Williams, and I think you'll see Reynolds involved.
Yeah.
And I think basically, most likely, like you see Swift take over the stuff that Igwebuike is going to leave, which was Swift's role before, but now you got three guys involved. The big thing we're hoping is, I hope Craig Reynolds is not a thing come next year, because they did sign him to the active roster and he did get a contract for next year.
Oh man, that's going to be rough. So
let's save that. Let's save that for the offseason, Ian.
Let's save that.
Let's table
All right, so I probably take both Broncos running backs over him. I would take Scott over him. Definitely Singletary, probably Rashad Penny. I think where I would start to draw a line, I would start Swift over Burkhead. I'd start Swift over Dari, over maybe Saquon at this point. Jesus.
Yeah,
I've got Foreman over Pollard. That's kind of like the range I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think you're still going to use Damian Harris over him.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you use Michael Carter. I have him in a tier with all these guys. Saquon's in there, Carter's in there, Kareem Hunt could come back this week. He's in there.
That's about the range. I don't want to be getting start-sit questions like Nick Chubb versus DeAndre Swift. So he's not a bad start necessarily, but just realize you're starting him more.
They could totally ride him and use it. It's in the range of outcomes. But I agree with you that I think there's enough doubt that the median range that we're probably expecting is a committee. And then there could also be the range where they have him active and he plays a little bit, but he's just hardly used at all.
And he was starting to come on as a rusher before the injury, but I'm not confident in him keeping that momentum going, now playing through a potentially painful shoulder issue. So just remember, this Lions, we've had a few bright spots here, but this is still one of the worst offenses in the league. Shouldn't be going out of our way to get exposure to anyone other than Amon-Ra St. Brown, doing nothing but balling out. Amon, the wide receiver 6, St. Brown, because in 3 of the last 4 weeks, he has finished as exactly the overall PPR wide receiver 6. 12 targets, 11. This dude's getting fed each and every week. And now we know that even if Jared Goff, who is now dealing with a knee injury, he's off the COVID list, but still not 100%. Even if we get Tim Boyle under center, I still think it's going to be hard to rank Amon-Ra outside of the top 24 receivers, particularly in full PPR scoring. Great matchup here. Only the football team and the Saints have allowed more receptions to slot receivers than the Seahawks this season. So the Seahawks, they've actually done a great job stopping the deep ball. Generally, I know Cooper Kupp got loose a couple times a few weeks ago, but generally they've graded out really well on passes to at least 20 yards downfield. But you look at them against slot receivers, and I think they've allowed the most receptions in the league to running backs. That's why their defense is so bad against running backs. They're not that bad at stopping the run. They just give up all these checkdowns. And it's kind of like, when we would play running backs against Dan Quinn and the Falcons for all those years. I think it's a pretty smart real life strategy. Of course, you want teams taking the 4 or 5 yard checkdowns to throwing it to open guys 20, 30 yards downfield. And this is just an instance where we can use that scheme against them in the fantasy world that we live in that can get funky sometimes. So slot receivers, receiving running backs have been very successful against the Seahawks. And again, maybe that will be DeAndre Swift, but the only guy right now that we can have any level of confidence in from a volume perspective is Amon-Ra St. Brown. So last week, just without Goff there, man, I wasn't as high in him as I should have been. But now that we've seen that, man, I do plan on answering the majority of start-sit questions, again, in full PPR with Amon-Ra St. Brown if it's close. So, Dwayne, unfortunately, we don't have anyone on Seattle guaranteed volume. Kind of Rashad Penny these days, but, man, if we can't get a boom against the Lions here, I don't even know what we're doing anymore, Russ.
Yeah, man, it's problematic. Like, with Russ, I've got him at 16 this week, even though it's a 7.4 out of 10 on the quarterback strength of schedule. And it probably will be a game that comes, even though they're favored by 7, like this is a game I just see coming down to the last play, even though it's the Lions and Seahawks. So, but with Wilson, man, like I was just doing some research because it's just, it's gotten so bad. But if you go back to week 10 of 2020, when the Rams utilized cover 6, quarters, and cover 2 on 52% of their plays against Wilson. Coming into that game, he was averaging 318 yards, 3.5 touchdowns per game. The Rams held him to 248 yards and 0 touchdowns. And since then, Wilson's only averaging 216 yards and 1.5 passing touchdowns per game. So it's just like the league, has decided we're just not going to let you throw the ball deep, Russ. And what are you going to do? And the Seahawks still haven't figured it out. Like we're talking a year and a half later. Like they still haven't figured this out. And so I put it on the coordinator. I put it on the head coach. I put it on Russ though too. Like, Russ, he's got to own some of this. So I've got him at 16 this week. I've got Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf as, they're still in the wide receiver 2 range, but closer to the bottom. You realize that they still have the boom. I thought maybe we were going to get it last week with Metcalf. Like we were off to a hot start, like right out of the gate. Like we all wanted it. But it just didn't come through. Tyler Lockett, another example, right, Ian, of a player coming back, from COVID. And who knows, like Lockett can put these kind of games up anyway. But I mean, a wide receiver 70 finish after really getting hot from weeks 11 through week 14 and having finishes of 23, 28, 11, and 5. And so when you look at Lockett, he's a player that, you're still going to get inside your top 24. And hopefully that was just something to do with COVID last week, whenever he fell off and had the wide receiver 70 finish. You mentioned Rashad Penny. Actually, let me just hit the last receiver, which is really the tight end. Gerald Everett, has done a really nice, job, over the last several weeks. I think you got to look at him as a low end tight end 1 at this point. 8.6 tight end strength of schedule, which is going to be top 4 on the week. It's a 14.1 points given up per game by the Lions to opposing tight ends. So he's in a pretty good spot. Like, the volume of the offense is always going to be, an anvil around everybody's neck. Like it's going to happen. But he's doing well enough that you can put him at that low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2, whichever one, tomato. You can use him. He's startable. Rashad Penny though, just focusing in on him for a second. The utilization last week, was really solid for Penny, 71% of the rushing attempts. So his last 3 games, he's handled 59%, 52%, and 71% of the rushing attempts. Alex Collins has been a non-factor despite being available last week. It's really just been Penny and DJ Dallas. So despite the fact that the offensive volume is low, again, if we can just get a backfield down to 2 players, there can be some value. And that's really what's happened for Penny. And so, yeah, there's still some risk here because of the play issues and just how bad the Seahawks offense can be. But at the same time, whenever you look at Penny and what he's been able to do, over the last 3 games, he's given you a running back 3, a running back 42, and a running back 9 finish. His utilization is strong enough to support low end RB1 down to mid-range RB2. I have him as RB17 this week. The matchup is great, a 9.3 out of 10 running back strength of schedule. It's going to be top 3 on the week. Ooh. So I think there is a chance for Penny, to really put up some nice numbers this week. So I think mid-range RB2 is a safe rank for him, but I think he has some upside. From there, obviously, carries a little more downside than a lot of other backs that we may, typically talk about in that range just due to the overall Seahawks offense.
Now, Dwain, you said you like to start weeks off and looking to see what games have a over-under, starting with a 5. This is our other game that starts with a freaking 3. Panthers at the Saints, New Orleans, 7-point favorites, 38-point game total. Only Giants and the Bears at 37.5 is lower at the moment. So, Matt Rule, man, comparing himself to Jay-Z, that's like the rock bottom we've reached in Carolina. Runs Joe Brady out of town on his day off during a bye week. Like, how do you get fired on your day off, man? We've been talking about this for years. So now apparently it's Sam Darnold season, back under center, back starting. But I'm sure we still have to worry about Cam Newton as a potential threat near the goal line. I would assume, because even when Cam was under center, Rule couldn't, go a day or 2 without talking about how they would still use PJ Walker. Maybe PJ Walker comes back and gets reps too. I don't don't know. Whatever he's doing, man, they haven't surpassed 250 passing yards in a game since week 4. Not so coincidentally, that was the last time that DJ Moore actually finished as a top 20 fantasy wide receiver. Last 3 weeks since the bye, DJ has been wide receiver 31, 29, and 44, actually getting outscored in 2 of those games by Robbie Anderson, who's been the wide receiver 6, 36, and 42. Other than that random wide receiver 6 game from Robbie, which, good job, man, you got one in there. But these are all bad numbers. So Robbie, DJ, who's better? Who cares? Stay away from this freaking offense, particularly in this, potentially hellacious matchup on the road in the Superdome against the Saints defense that, yeah, I saw against the Dolphins when Ian Book was under center, just really no chance. But even then, other than Jalen Waddle, wasn't a whole lot going on for that Miami offense. So in Carolina, I don't even think they have the play calling structure right now to enable someone in a similar manner as what the Dolphins were able to do with Waddle. So DJ, Robbie, sure as hell are in the top 24. I'm not putting Robbie in the top 40 still. DJ, I think, is going to be one of those guys where at some point you just need to slide him in the back end of that wide receiver 3 range. Certainly not someone that needs to be started or that you should want to start at this point in the year. Dwayne, you were saying like Mike Williams was kind of the guy that maybe you had right in the preseason, and then you saw the first 4 or 5 weeks, you changed your opinion, and then he became, turned back into the pumpkin that we kind of thought he was. That's how I was with DJ Moore. Like completely faded this guy throughout the offseason. Felt like a freaking idiot after the first month of the year, changed all my priors. And
the thing is, you had it right for the right reason. It was never a thing against DJ Moore. You didn't believe in Sam Darnold.
How many times? Yeah, I spent hours on this podcast just ripping apart Sam Darnold throughout the summer. So it wasn't exactly, the longest limb to go on, but there were some actual weird Darnold defenders this year. So whatever, we spent enough words on him. With these running backs, Chuba Hubbard, ever since Christian McCaffrey has gone out, RB 29, 51, and 80. Amir Abdullah did sneak in an RB 11 finish in week 15. That was sandwiched between RB 40 and RB 49 duds. He could have caught 2 touchdowns last week, but he has Sam Darnold and Cam Newton playing quarterback. He was overthrown on both of them. So long way of saying, try to not start a single person from this Panthers offense if you can at all help it. If you are truly desperate, DJ Moore as a boom or more likely bust wide receiver 3. Keep in mind the Saints defense will probably be shadowing DJ with Marshawn Lattimore, and they're also a top 3 unit in rushing yards and scores allowed to opposing RBs. Dwayne, we have got some helpful news in the middle of this podcast that Taysom Hill is back under center. Ian Book experience did not go well. They could read him like a book. I'm the 2 millionth person to make that joke over the past week. And now it's on to you, Dwayne. What are your expectations for Taysom, for Kamara, for the Saints offense now that I don't want to say they have a real quarterback under center, but it's at least somewhat closer than what we saw on Monday night?
I mean, Taysom, I've got him. We don't spend a lot of time on it. Like, look, we know the legs were the cheat code. We just talked about it with Trey Lance. I have these guys all in a tier together. Trey Lance, Taysom Hill, Justin Fields, all together.
Yeah.
Hill can come through for you on the ground. You just have to realize, he's a very bad passer. There's not a lot of upside in the passing game for you in Taysom Hill. And if the passing game does not go well, and for whatever reason he doesn't score a rushing touchdown, even though these guys can run a lot, the floor is low, right? People get confused. They're like, oh no, if you run, you got a high floor. You have to be able to do both. There's a reason, Jalen Hurts, it works because the Eagles freaking run the ball 55 to 60% of plays. So it overcomes that, potential downside, right? Whenever you look at the way they run their offense, and they're able to play from ahead. Really, the Saints have just struggled on offense, even though that's the way they want to run, that's the way they want their offense to play. They just haven't been able to keep drives going. So as bad as Jalen Hurts has been, passing the ball, Taysom Hill has been even worse. And so that's a problem for him. But at the same time, he's got the legs. He can give you a top 6 finish easily. He does it more times than not. So if you're in a situation like you talked about earlier where it's like, well, I got Taysom Hill, or I could go with Russ Wilson or Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr or any of those guys, you're going with Taysom Hill over all those. Where I'm not going to get carried away is I'm not going to start Taysom Hill over Brady just because he's missing a weapon, right? I'm not going to start him over Dak Prescott. And we saw why last week. Dak woke up. Dak's like, oh, okay, let's play football. Matt Stafford, yes, there's things that are bad, but it's just a better offense. I'm not starting Taysom Hill over Matthew Stafford. I'm starting all those guys over him. As far as the running back situation, we don't have to talk about the receivers or tight ends because there's none you should be playing. Right. And if you are, you should immediately look to the waiver wire or just put no one in, and just start, just take a bold stance and just have no one.
I surprisingly have one thing to mention about this. Not that you should be playing anyone, but Deontay Harris, his suspension. Well, his suspension's over, but he's on the COVID list, so he's probably not. He's not going to be a factor. But I'm reading the end of this Roto World blurb, and Harris legally changed his name to Deontay Hardy on Christmas as a Christmas present to his stepfather, who has been a part of his life for the past 17 years. Should I take a page out of Harris's book, Dwain, and check out the tits and just become Ian Hardy? You know, it's a question that a lot of people are going to be asking.
I would never take out the tits personally. But anyway.
Never take out the tits. Okay, but now back to Alvin Kamara.
No, I'm sure Andrew Erickson's recording a TikTok on this right now. So if you guys want to switch over to his channel, he's probably got this covered. He is the Deontay Harris whisperer. Where was I? Kamara. Yeah. So, man, here's the good news on Kamara. Like last week, 67%. From a running back perspective, he handled 67% of the receiving snaps versus 33% for Ingram, where we saw it be much more equal the game before. Whenever you look at it, from a rushing standpoint, it was also better for Kamara. The splits weren't as bad. He actually handled 68% of the rushing attempts, only 21% for Mark Ingram. So from a utilization perspective, like it looked better like that. And look, that's a positive, but the outcome still was terrible. It was, so now in the last two games for Kamara, we've had finishes of RB 51 and RB 35. Oh my God. Like, what is happening, Ian? So you got to match up against Carolina. It's a 7.5 out of 10 on the running back strength of schedule. Carolina was kind of tough against the run early in the season. That's really shifted, even though they're giving up 20.6 points to opposing running backs. It's an offense that trails a lot, but can New Orleans get ahead? I don't know. The biggest issue here is we don't have the upside in the receiving game we used to have for Kamara, because they run the ball so much, and the fact that you got a quarterback that wants to scramble, A, and B is not very accurate. So these things they just add up to being bad for, a running back that we almost could never fathom. Like, how do you rank this player outside your top 5 in any week? Now I consistently find myself struggling to find a way to keep Kamara in my top 10. And that's where I'm at this week. Like right now I've got him in the second tier I've got Elijah Mitchell ahead of him right now. I've got Chase Edmonds, assuming James Conner doesn't play. He's a game time decision. I know we'll get to that in a minute. I've got him the same tier as Najee Harris, who's getting volume but no efficiency. Aaron Jones really kind of coming back into play in the Green Bay backfield. And then you have your volume backs, right? David Montgomery, Devin Singletary, Sony Michel. So it's like I almost feel like Kamara really
is Chubb above all those guys?
No, because I'm assuming that Hunt's going to play this week. Okay. So I've got Chubb at the top of the next tier, or closer to the top of the next tier down. So like that's the tier where I have Kamara. And I think you could make an argument on where to place him anywhere in that tier, from 6 all the way down to below Sony Michel being last in that tier. So I'm kind of struggling with him a little bit this week, but he won't be in my top 5 for sure.
Yeah, I asked that completely looking out for my own fantasy team. Got to win. We got 5 ships we're trying to take down, Dwayne. I got Chubb, Kamara, Mixon, Damian Harris, Jeff Wilson, Madison to try to sort that one out. So I'll probably be in your DMs drunkenly throughout the week.
Let's do it.
Bouncing off players. Cardinals at the Cowboys. Dallas 5.5 point favorites. Game total 51.5. I know, hasn't been the prettiest, offense over the past few weeks, but this season as a whole from Kyler, just exactly the progression you would want to see from your franchise quarterback. First in big-time throw rate, 8.4%. Fourth in turnover-worthy play rate, 2.2%. Dude's making more elite throws than just about anyone, while also not making boneheaded mistakes. And we did see that continue, or I should say return, to high-end fantasy value last week with a quarterback 6 finish. I know, QB 13, QB 17 before that. It's Kyler freaking Murray, people, in the highest game total of the week. You are starting him even if there is a fire. The bigger question is just going to come down to injuries in this backfield, because Chase Edmonds showed exactly why, Dwayne, we were hyping him up as a great potential trade candidate, and then he got hurt, and James Conner did all the things that we were hoping Edmonds did, and then Conner was out, and Chase Edmonds comes in, takes the 90% snap rate, and just dominates usage. So especially having Rondale Moore out of the picture as well, there just isn't anyone else really to fill that dump down role in this offense, which once again could be awfully prolific in a game that has the Cowboys sitting as 5.5 point home favorites. So James Conner is a game time decision again. Dwayne, I think based on this potential game script, and we'll see with Rondale, but clearly he's not 100% either, I think we got to rank Chase ahead of Conner if both are active, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Coming off the game time decision and then, DNP today, and they've already said he's going to be a game time decision. Honestly, I just hope they don't play Connor this weekend.
Me too. Fingers crossed.
Just let us roll with Chase Edmonds. And I have Connor on some teams that I'm trying to win, like some cash. But I'm hoping I can just put him on the bench, and just go with another option.
I have one team with both these dudes on it, so that'd be especially appreciated to get that figured out. So that's why make sure you tune in to our Friday afternoon edition of this podcast where we break down all the relevant injuries, and we will have, a more thought out explanation for what to do here. Hopefully by then, or it's going to be another game time decision, and we'll continue to push back this analysis. With the receiving room, we've now had 2 games without DeAndre Hopkins. Number 1 target leader is not Christian Kirk. It's Zach Ertz with 24 targets. Then it's actually Christian Kirk at 21. Then there's a big drop off. AJ Green and Antoine Wesley both have 11. Chase Edmonds with 10. Nobody else more than 3. So Zach Ertz at this point, Kyle Pitts, tight end 5. I agree there. And we all know the top 4. If you wanted to rank Ertz as high as 6, though, I think you have an argument for it. He's probably in that tier between your tight end 6, your tight end 10 or 11. And again, based on this matchup against the Cowboys defense, he scored a touchdown, had a good enough game against before. I mean, Dwain, you're a Cowboys fan. You know it. Ertz has had this defense's number for years, I feel like, or Dallas Goedert. All those Eagles tight ends always seem to do good stuff against the Cowboys. Maybe now that he's wearing red, it'll be different. But to Ertz's credit, man, someone that I will definitely take the L on. Not in terms of his situation. I mean, I think we saw that nothing good was going to come from him sticking around with Philly and splitting things with Goddard in a run-first offense. But I just thought he was washed. Like, he was so bad efficiency-wise last year, was playing through a lot of pain.
Tight end is just one of those positions, man, like those veterans that know how to play it, and they know especially how to set up against zone coverage, which is what they face a lot of inside. They can thrive. They can play a long time. I mean, they have to work to stay healthy. I mean, let's face it, like Gronk isn't what he used to be either. We saw Jason Witten do it for forever. Right. And be effective for a long time. So, I mean, it's one of these things where you don't have to be the athlete you once were at tight end. Yeah, we'd rather see it be that way. But these guys, he's a first down magnet for Kyler Murray.
I did a study in July 2020 where I basically looked at top 12 performers by position over the past decade and looked at, the years of experience for each one. So yeah, like running back, overwhelming majority first 4 years of their career. Wide receiver stretched a little bit more to 6. Tight end and quarterback had their, areas kind of 2 to 4 years. You start seeing some guys, but running back and wide receiver dies after 7 or 8 years. Tight end, the highest single year was 10 plus years of experience of having these actual top 12 contributors. Your Antonio Gates, your Jason Wittens of the world, now your Gronks and these other guys, they can play longer. And the same thing was true with quarterbacks. So just something to keep in mind as we continue to try to hone that analysis and, have less and less whiffs until Dwain and I just get every single one of our preseason rankings right, hopefully as soon as next year, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, Zach Ertz, definitely a tight end we can feel great about. And, in my opinion, even though he hasn't been scoring over the past few weeks, I mean, if you would have to place a wager down on who you think is going to be the primary red zone target, I would lean towards Ertz. And then with Christian Kirk, if he's not in your top 24, I think you'd be hard-pressed to leave him too far out of it. Obviously, a winnable matchup here against the Cowboys. It's just a matter of how much havoc can Lawrence, Gregory, and Parsons, wreak on this Cardinals offense.
It's going to be an awesome game. Those 3 guys chasing down Kyler Murray the whole game. It's going to be so entertaining.
I just think maybe, man, the way the Cowboys are humming and the Cardinals are falling off, the best version of the Cardinals team makes this a great game. I just think we're seeing the best version of the Cowboys team right now. I'm curious if the Cardinals are going to be able to keep up or not, but this is easily
the Cardinals have to make their stand at some point. They have to say we're not completely backing into the playoffs. And this is the spot to do it.
Huge game. So on the Cowboys, 56 big ones last week. We had a punt block in there. We had DeMarcus Lawrence, pick 6. Not all on the offense, but
I kept looking up, waiting to see if Leon Lett was going to be running down the field and have the ball swiped out of his hand.
We were just recording our Sunday pod, and the game was over. But got done mid-second quarter, and I was like, oh, okay, this one's over. Because as you said, man, Dak woke up, and he sure did in a big way.
Yeah, so with the Cowboys, Dak really bounced back, with the big game. against Washington on Monday night. Washington was obviously depleted, but like this is the game that the Cowboys really needed. They just needed to come out and really like be dominant, and that's what they were. Prescott, he was fooled by the fourth quarter, but if you look at what he was able to do, before then, like spreading the ball around to all the different offensive weapons, that we didn't have anybody really blow up for the Cowboys. It was mainly Dalton Schultz and Amari Cooper, but it was just good really to see Prescott, get to firing back again on all cylinders, handling 39 dropbacks, 28 completions, 330 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 3 big-time throws, 1 turnover-worthy play, which was big because he had several turnover-worthy plays in the 2 games before, typically on the bootleg where he was rolling out trying to find Dalton Schultz and would have a linebacker right underneath that, tipping it up for a pick. So he didn't have any of those in the game. So with Prescott, like this is a great spot. I'm looking forward to this game. It's going to be it's a must-win game really for both teams. Like the Cardinals have got to stop the bleeding. They've got playoff seeding on the line. The Cowboys have playoff seeding on the line. They're in second right now, but they have the same record as the Cardinals. So this win goes a long way. Green Bay obviously sitting up there at the top with that 1 seed right now, but Dallas wanting to keep the pressure on. And so we've just got a good spot really here with a game that matters to both teams. As far as the running game goes, man, it's just I know Zeke came through for folks last week, Ian, and we still like the Cowboys offense, but it's just, the utilization is still not there for Elliott. Looking at his snaps, 64%, 62-58. Not bad, but he has not had 100 all-purpose yards since week 6, Ian. Like it's really bad. He's come through with touchdowns in the last 2 games, which has really saved folks. So it's helped him, have 2 top 12 back-to-back finishes. He's running back 6 right now on the year. So like obviously like Zeke, he has some good things going. He's in a good offense. He did say today that he thinks he's the healthiest that he's been in multiple weeks, and he's ready to go for the playoffs. So I think of Zeke though really still more as like this high-end RB2 to mid-range RB2, at best. But like this week, just looking at the slate and looking at all the, the different variables, like I've got Zeke right now sitting at 22, Ian. I've got him below Javonte Williams. I've got him below Nick Chubb, below Josh Jacobs, below Rashad Penny, Cordarrelle Patterson, Darrell Williams. I have all those guys ahead of Zeke. And it's mostly a utilization thing. So like last week, they let Zeke sit late in the game. So only had 35% of the rushing attempts. But it's just a situation where, again, not being able to break the 100 yards all-purpose in multiple weeks. Like it's not like Zeke's giving you these big plays or giving you the upside of big plays. You are literally getting like, oh, Zeke gets a touch. Let me get a point for that touch. And you're not getting much more than that. So it's still problematic, in my opinion, for Elliott. Let's see. He could get healthy and really, challenge down the stretch. Tony Pollard, still in his normal role, so I think you can use him as an RB3 this week. The Cardinals' running back strength of set schedule is below average. It's a 4.8 out of 10, but Dallas's offensive line is getting healthier. We could see a situation where it's really, honestly, the healthiest that it's been in probably 5, 6, 7 weeks now. So if we get that, I think that'll be a good thing for them. But right now, it's rated an offensive line run blocking advantage of 75. So I've got Pollard again as an RB3, and then the receivers, man. Like this is what we needed. We just needed the game where we weren't stuck down around 200, 250 yards passing. And so it's still going to be tough, though, when you've got 4 weapons that you've got to feed. There's going to always be someone that's going to, potentially be left out. And if you look at it last week, Lamb only had 13% of the targets, finishes wide receiver 44. And if you look at it, Ian, like it's a little concerning. I'll get your thoughts on it. Like, CD Lamb, we love him. We know the talent is there. But like the thing we did worry about earlier in the year, before like Gallup got hurt right out of the gate and made it a non-factor, with his calf injury, Lamb's finishes here 30, 27, 44 over the last 3 weeks, really since we've had Gallup fully back in the picture. And it's not that Gallup's coming up with these big games. He's been a finishes of 45, 58, 61. Amari Cooper's had a 22, an 89, and a 9. So it's really just been it's more of it just being spread out across all of these guys. Whereas Dalton Schultz, he's been over the last 2 weeks, the tight end 4 and the tight end 2. So with the Cowboys, like you're going to start them, you're going to play them, like you've got to use them. But just know that it can be a situation where one of these guys can be the odd one left. I say you've got to use them. You don't have to use Gallup. I think the players that are really tough to get on your bench no matter what are Lamb, Cooper, and Schultz.
Yeah, and I've listed the teams implied for 16 or fewer points. I think the same can be said on the other side of things, where you should, in tiebreakers, be going with the guys on the better offenses. This week we have 7 offenses implied for 27 or more points. The Packers, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the 49ers, the Patriots, Buccaneers, and the Bills. We talk a little bit about Trey Lance, Jimmy G, but generally, guys from those offenses, we are feeling good. Vikings at the Packers, Green Bay 6.5 point favorites, game total at 47.5. Unfortunately, Adam Thielen done for the season with an ankle. Believe it is broken. So hopefully Thielen gets back to full health. The dude just keeps scoring touchdowns. Maybe he'll keep playing until he's like 50, just scoring one after another, red zone threat for days. But this does mean KJ Osborne is back in the upside wide receiver 3 conversation. And Dwain, I just saw your tweet, man. Didn't even look this up for myself, so hope you're right. But in 4 games with Thielen either sidelined or limited by an in-game injury, Osborne has posted wide receiver 21, 17, 64, and 15 finishes. So firmly in that wide receiver 3 discussion. And in this game, man, like there aren't really many that we could see shooting out in a major way. Again, we have Cardinals, Cowboys first, Chiefs, Bengals next, and after that, it is Vikings, Packers in terms of the highest game totals of the week. Those are the only ones above 47 points. So we will see Jair Alexander back in the picture for Green Bay, but he's not the shadowing type. They basically stopped doing that. I believe it was week 6 or so last year. Weren't doing it this year in the first month of the year. Maybe they make an exception for Justin Jefferson, but I have a hard time believing they do that in the first week back from injury for Alexander. And even if they do, man, it doesn't matter because all these shadow things, like it's really fun on social media, but at least in terms of fantasy, I think you're better off ignoring it because the amount of people I saw talking about Jalen Ramsey shutting down Justin Jefferson, like, what are we doing here, man? Okay, he had 3 catches for 24 yards in Ramsey's coverage. How is that Jefferson's problem that Ramsey wouldn't follow him around the rest of the field? Like, so the 8 catches for 116 yards on the afternoon, like we're just going to ignore that because it didn't come against Ramsey. The Vikings can only line up Jefferson against Ramsey because like that needs to prove something out there. It's on the cornerback to follow the receiver, man. So I know it's not always fair to them. We see the pick routes and it's probably not even worth it for a defense to be doing these things, but just spare me this whole idea that Ramsey locked up Jefferson. Just like what they should do, man, have Ramsey guard the number 1 receiver for the first snap every game and just really try hard in that snap to take him away and don't do it the rest of the game. Then you can just say he locked him up because he didn't do anything on the 1 snap. So just a little tilting moment I've been going through today as I wrote my wide receiver cornerback column. Happy to get that off my chest to you all. Moral of the story, Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 4 in PPR points per game behind only Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and Deebo Samuel. He's been locked in as a matchup-proof wide receiver 1 for a long time. Feeling good about those 2 in the passing game. Now, do need to keep an eye on Tyler Conklin because, Dwayne, the year of Hartitz would be complete with a Chris Herndon boom performance in week 17. I don't think it's going to happen. Please, for the love of God.
That would be pretty amazing.
Please, for the love of God, don't start Chris Herndon in any league that you care about winning. But he would be the next tight end up. It'd probably end up being more of a split usage. I mean, again, running back, that's the position that we can feel the best about. A backup coming in, maybe seeing something resembling the workload. But even with that, as we talked about all year long, and as you have all seen, when we try to predict the RB2 becoming the RB1, things can change in a hurry. And that's at running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Much harder to tell, unless you're the Washington football team who just, would probably give Dwayne 100% snap rate if he was the last guy on their roster. So keep an eye on that Tyler Conklin hamstring injury. But yeah, certainly not what we want to see to start the week. And we do have Dalvin back from the COVID list. You guys know what to do. Like if there is one room in the league and one player that we should feel good about coming in, playing through the injury and just getting fed his usual workload, it is Dalvin Cook with the Vikings. Mike Zimmer has just always given him basically full-time, 3 down, you're back, you're the guy. Look no further than the freaking shoulder game against the Steelers when he had over 200 yards and we weren't even sure if he was going to play until like 7 p.m. on that Thursday night. So Dalvin back in the starting lineup. If you want to drop him a little bit because of the COVID concerns, that's fine. But, good luck ranking more than 10 or so guys ahead of him. So with that all in mind, Dwayne, we got the Packers and then we know the usual suspects, Devontae, Aaron, Rodgers. I bet Aaron Jones and then Aaron Rodgers. I realized that kind of came off a little weird there. But we did have things get shuffled up a little bit with Marquez Valdes-Scantling back from the COVID list. So beyond the usual suspects, Dwayne, how intrigued are you by MVS and by Allen Lazard against, as we've seen really all year long, an awfully burnable Vikings secondary?
I would be a lot more interested if I knew one of the 2 was out.
Yeah.
Because when they're both back, we just don't know. One of them will probably hit. Like now, I mean, your range of outcomes just change, right? You know what I mean? There could be the chance they both just cancel each other out. They kind of both do a little something, right? Or one of them goes off. Whereas if you've just got one of them, like you just know the floor gets better and you've just got a better shot at it. So because it is so funneled towards really, Devonta Adams. So that's the issue here. So I'll have them both right around probably 50. They'll be close to each other in the ranks. Lazard really is more the slot receiver, right? Valdez-Scantling is the guy that's the field stretcher. Lazard did a little bit more of that last week just because of, missing Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So we'll have to see. Like typically in a situation like this, though, if I'm just trying to come through with a big play, I typically lean to the player that has the better ADOT, the better air yards, which has been Marquez Valdez-Scantling. But I think I'll most likely keep Lazard ahead in the ranks this week just because of what we talked about earlier. Like he's coming back from COVID. So we just don't know for sure what Valdez-Scantling is going to look like. So if I had to pick between the two, I would definitely go with Lazard. The matchup, like you mentioned, is good. It's an 8.2 out of 10 on the wide receiver strength of schedule. So 41.4 points allowed per game by Minnesota to opposing wide receivers in a PPR format. So both of them are, you're not going to trust them. You don't love them, but like there are several things that set up nicely for them. But I think, like I said, I'm going to lean to Lazard and keep him ahead in the ranks just because he's not coming off of the COVID list. One other note, just on the running backs, we did see for the second consecutive week, we saw Aaron Jones stay in the lead from a snap standpoint. He's had 63% and 56% versus 37% and 44% for A.J. Dillon. Rushing attempts 57% and 50% versus 30 and 38. Whereas when we saw Jones first come back from the injury, like in week 14, he only had 20% of the rushing attempts. So we really had to downgrade his outlook. But now he's almost back to where he was to begin the season. He's going to handle 50 to 60% of the rushing plays. He's going to handle most of the long down and distance. He's going to handle all of the 2-minute offense. So his routes are hanging around right around 50%. We would prefer to see that number around 60-65%. That's like where the elite guys are. But still 50% in an offense like Green Bay where he can still have it funneled to him. I like Aaron Jones this week. Got him in my top 10. Again, the 27 implied points help. 6.3 on the running back strength of schedule out of 10. So it's just a nice spot, and we could be starting to. We'll see if we can get this Packers offensive line healthier. Like it's amazing that they've still been doing all this without Bakhtiari. He hasn't even played yet.
The defense too, without Jair and Zadarius,
and he's coming back. Like so, he's actually officially been activated. So you're going to see Jair Alexander. So yeah, Green Bay, man, they could really just be hitting their stride. So Jones is in my top 12. But on the other side of that coin, right, where really A.J. Dillon had become somebody that we could trust at the top end of the running back 3 board or maybe low end RB2, kind of more like a Melvin Gordon, like that's just not the case anymore. He's not seeing that same utilization. So right now you got to treat him more like that mid-range to low end RB3 for A.J. Dillon.
Put him like one spot ahead of Ramondre Stevenson. I think we can agree on that. Nothing against Ramondre. I just kind of think that's a good spot for him.
I think it is very similar. I think you get two backs that are going to see about 35% of the work. So
it's a great matchup. I mean, Chargers and the Vikings are the only teams in the league where when you run the ball on them, you actually still get a positive EPA per play. So we do need to keep in mind that as bad as that secondary is, front seven without Danielle Hunter has also been awfully rough. Final game of the final main preview. We'll probably preview the games next week, but probably a little more loosey-goosey. Not 2.5 hours. Just going out on a limb there. Browns at the Steelers. Monday Night Football. Cleveland 3-point faves. Game total of 41. So with Baker, just some notes. It hasn't even been fluky bad for him, man. If you just want to hang it all on the injuries, that's fine. But he is playing behind our 10th best pass blocking O-line in PFF grade, 4th best rushing attack. But, we do have PFF grades in certain situations that are far more stable than others. Throwing downfield, being under pressure, these are not stable things. These are things we see go real volatile from year to year. So these grades are supposedly, based on some of the freaking smartest guys we have in the company that have helped do this over the years. These are the ones that we should expect to better indicate a great quarterback from year to year. I know, for example, Joe Burrow was really good in these things last year despite being in a bad Bengals offense. So Baker Mayfield, passing grade from a clean pocket, he is 23rd among qualified quarterbacks. Standard dropbacks from within the pocket, 26th. On first and second down, 19th. No play action, 35th. Passes to or beyond the sticks, 30th. Absolute brutal for everyone involved in this passing game. And there's no receiver that you can feel good about this week. Jarvis Landry has 2 top 24 finishes on the season. Hasn't finished better than wide receiver 17. Donovan Peoples-Jones also has 2 top 24 finishes, and he's the only guy to have a wide receiver 1 finish out of the duo. The problem is his floor is even lower than Landry, so couldn't pay me to start either Landry or Donovan Peoples-Jones. If I could help it, man, try not to. And unfortunately, we can't get behind these tight ends as well. We did see Njoku play 100% of the snaps 2 weeks ago, but Austin Hooper came back, and we saw that go right back to a 3 tight end committee. And oh, hey, Harrison Bryant happened to be the one that scored a touchdown. I truly believe each of Bryant, Njoku, and Hooper, if you just left them alone as the only tight end in this offense, they'd be a weekly tight end 1. That's not the case, so we can't touch them in fantasy, which leads us to the only relevant guy here, Nick Chubb, because, man, I don't want to start Kareem Hunt if he's out there, man, because Kevin Stefanski actually already came out and said that even if Hunt had been activated from the COVID list last week, his ankle still hurt enough that he wouldn't have been able to play. So we need to still keep an eye on this ankle. I think they feel good enough about Dearness Johnson, man, that it could be a situation where maybe they think 100% healthy Dearness Johnson is better than an 80-90% Kareem Hunt. Either way, I don't necessarily see them stopping the full Chubb treatment and just reverting back to what we kind of saw in the first 4 weeks of the year. Maybe I'm, just thinking a little too much into it, but they have fed Chubb at least 20 touches in 4 of his 5 games since returning from injury. It hasn't been enough. Like, I really wish they would just take a page out of Frank Reich's book, when you and me were bitching at him for like 2 weeks to feed him more, and he did. Like, come on, Browns, what are you guys waiting for? Come on.
We gotta get Stefanski listening to the pod. Like, right?
Yes,
right,
exactly.
Right is an avid fan. He loves us.
He even listens like to the waiver and DFS pods. Like, Reich is all in, Stefanski is not. So, keep that in mind. But yeah, with Nick Chubb, it sounded like, Dwayne, you kind of had him in that RB 13, 14 kind of range if Hunt is going to be back in the picture and ready to go. How would that change for you if Hunt is completely out? Because
if Hunt's out, like, there's no.
We can't go like top 5 though, which sucks because it's not that the Dearness is getting that many touches, but we're still seeing Chubb like sub 70% snaps, and I don't, for the life of me, I can't figure out why.
But his rushing attempts are up over 70%, so they have very defined roles. Like, he doesn't get to handle the passing down work; it's a problem, but it's also the Browns who are very dedicated to running the ball, even if they're losing, even if the game is close. Yeah. If the game is ahead, they don't care. Like, everything is set up off of the run, and their quarterbacks suck. So it's just a situation where I think Chubb, even if you get in a game script that's kind of nasty, and it's the Steelers, like, it's not really, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think Chubb's in the top 6. Like, anytime Kareem Hunt's out, like, Chubb's pretty much on almost auto in my top 6, unless he's just got a terrible matchup.
You're right. I do laugh every time you say someone sucks. I can't get enough of it. But yes, this matchup truly is great. Game script wise, and also just because the fact the Steelers are the league's single worst defense in yards before contact allowed per carry. Steelers rushing yards allowed in the second half of the year starting in week 9, 136, 229, 159, 198, 107, 242, 201, most recently 127 to the Chiefs. So would not expect the Browns to have too much trouble. Hashtag establishing that run. Again, my main point with the Chubb ranking, it's kind of like with Deebo Samuel, like this week. You can put him at wide receiver 8. You can put him at wide receiver 14. You're starting the guy. You're starting Nick Chubb. Hopefully, he breaks a big one, goes and gets you that fantasy ship. Now, Dwayne, in Pittsburgh, we got Deontay, we got Najee. And if you want to add anything else, feel free.
Yeah, just a couple of notes, with Najee, looking at him, over this past, 5-6 weeks, like, the utilization is still there, right? It's all good, but like all the things we worried about with the Steelers offense early in the season that didn't really hold Najee back too much, like it's all getting him right now. The offensive line play. So if you look at Najee's finishes, like, whereas early in the season, we had 3 top 6 finishes. Week 3, week 4, week 6. He had top 8 finish in week 2. But since week 9, so starting in week 10, it's been 18, 12, 38, 18. He did get a 4. Then he's 56 and 13. So he's really more that low-end RB1, despite the volume that we're getting. And it's just a challenge because if you look at all the backs that have at least 150 rushing attempts, on the season, there are 24 such running backs. And if you look at it right now, Chubb has an Najee Harris has a 9% explosive rush rate, which is carries of 10 yards or more, versus Nick Chubb's at 18%, the guy you love. Jonathan Taylor, 15%. Dalvin Cook, 15%. Like, he's just way down towards the bottom. It's better than A.J. Dillon at a 6%. Kamara's down there at a 7%, but, like, just not a lot of explosive plays. Then whenever you look at, and this is where the offensive line comes in, to affect. When you look at his point of attack change, where he has to actually change like the hole that he's originally attacking as he's rushing, 17%, which is the 5th most in the league. Now, some backs just like to do this because they're very side to side, right? They're like David Montgomery always ranks high in this, like always, because like he likes to dance. He's a very lateral, a laterally focused type like back, right? His first move is quite often like to one side or the other, then forward. Whereas with someone like Chubb, right, it's much more downhill, that sort of thing. But with Harris, 17%. When you look at his stuff rate, so that's where you get tackled for a gain of 0 or negative yards, 8%, which is below that's bad actually compared to a lot of the other backs in the league. But yards before contact, like this is the other thing that ties back to the offensive line. So yards before contact, 0.91. So that's just really bad when you look at all the backs with at least 250 or 150 carries. That's the 3rd worst in the league. So he's not getting any help right now from his offensive line. If you look at his yards after contact, like they're not terrible. Like they're not as good as some of the elite backs, but they're not bad. Missed tackles forced per attempt, like right there in the middle of the pack. So there's just a lot of factors going on with Harris right now. And it's overall the offense is really, I think look, Harris is not the same back that we see with Javonte Williams. We know there are other backs, so he's got his own issues. But even with all that said, like if this was just a normal functional offense, like I think we would still see Harris with the utilization he's getting be a top 6 back. So we'll have to see how things shape out, next year. But right now I've got him as the running back 9 for the week. It's a 4.9 out of 10 on the running back strength of schedule. Offensive line run blocking advantage, not much of one, only an 11, just because of what we were just talking about a few minutes ago, which is one of the worst on the slate for the weekend. Deontay Johnson, it is a tough matchup. Wide receiver strength of schedule is 2.8 out of 10, but Deontay Johnson doesn't care because he's one of the few players in the league that whether it is, targets versus zone, whether it's versus man, doesn't matter. He is the absolute alpha on his team, like Roethlisberger and he or simpatico, no matter what's going on. So there's only a few receivers in the league that get that, their targets per route run up over the 28%, 29% mark against both man and zone coverage, and Deontay Johnson is one of those, man. Chase Claypool, just one note on him. Like his utilization routes have been really crappy, had been down below the 60%, well below 70%. This past week, he got nearly back to 80%. So maybe he's kind of thawing out, coming out of the doghouse a little bit. But again, we've got a pretty lethargic passing game right now with Ben. He kind of showed a little bit of a spark 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's really fallen off again. And Cleveland's been a tough matchup, like I talked about with Deontay Johnson. So with Claypool, this week, I've got him just outside my top 36. So he's more of a boom bust wide receiver 4 at this point of the season. And Freiermuth did practice, so we should see him back from a concussion. The Browns have just been a good defense, period. It's a 0.6 out of 10 tight end strength of schedule. So I've got Freiermuth at the bottom of my tight end ones this week based on the matchup, not on the player. The player's still fine. He deserves to be in the side of the top 12, just not the greatest matchup.
I want to try to speak this into existence. What we need is for the Steelers to somehow get a wild card spot, get the Nickelodeon game because it looks terrible on paper, and get blown out, and then we all get to ironically vote Ben Roethlisberger for MVP in his final game as a professional. That's my nirvana, Dwayne, and I can only hope that it comes to fruition. And I just want to say, everyone, I hope that you've enjoyed the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast today and all year. And if you had, I invite you that for a limited time, you can get 50% off a PFF Elite annual subscription if you use code ELITEUP. All locked article content, betting dashboard, 0 to 100 grades, player prop tool, all that and more. If you win fantasy money with it, if you want to just show some appreciation for the pod, this is how. A Christmas gift to you. Use promo code ELITEUP for 50% off an entire year of PFF Elite. And again, this isn't just giving us money that you're not getting anything for. The idea is that now you'll have so much more tools to use yourself. You can make even more money. You're investing in yourself by using code ELITEUP for 50% off an entire year of PFF Elite. But hey, maybe DraftKings is your thing. And if it is, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $5 on any NFL team and win $200 in free bets if they are victorious. That's promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Note that you must be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania. Only new customers, only minimum $5 deposit, $1 wager, one per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And finally, go submit questions for Chris Collinsworth, whatever you want to ask him. Behind the scenes with Al Michaels, fantasy football questions, whatever. He doesn't care. Just ask him. westernsouthern.com/askchris, and you will now be eligible to win a catering of up to $2,500 coordinated from a restaurant near you that will be delivered on the day of the Super Bowl, February 13th, 2022. You can hear those answers on the Chris Collinsworth podcast and on Western and Southern's Instagram. Again, submit those at westernsouthern.com/askchris. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. And remember, Western and Southern, you can rest assured on game day. We're done it, Dwayne. We're done. Anything else you want to get off your chest? Because I'm freaking, my throat hurts. I'm ready to drink some alcohol.
No, man. Yeah. Once you record for 2.5 hours, like, you're done. That's just the way the cosmos work.
We are done. I have nothing at this second that I want to get off my chest, but who knows the way the NFL is going. So thank you, Dwayne. Everyone can find your utilization report and everything else that you're just known for and handy dandy with on PFF.com. I got tons of cool shit up there too. You guys have heard it before for the few of you still listening. So for Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.